Welcome to the Marshall Pruett podcast and our Week in Sports Cars episode for September 18th. You know, Graham Goodwin, our first question involves asking if you could buy me a new watch, because whenever
It's always about you, isn't it, MP?
I know.
It's always about you.
It's about me because our listeners realize how much help I need. And yes, with the first question asking if you could indeed help me with my time-telling capabilities, thanks to Graham Ingleby, who said, can someone buy Marshall Pruett a new watch? Every time he says, we have about 20 minutes left, you know there's a good hour still to come. Funny you should mention that, Graham. So, thanks to the timestamps provided by Skype, which we use for our calls from California to the UK each week. Let's see. I sent Graham a note at 11:59 a.m. saying calling in 5 minutes or less. I believe that call took place, 12, 15, 18 minutes later? Something like that? So,
easily.
Yeah.
Listen, it's Mickey's left hand is scratching his right ear. It's that time.
There's definitely some scratching involved. So, Graham, I don't, well, as in our dear listener, I can't tell you if it's just because I'm not good with math in my head, or the whole big hand, little hand on the clock has me confused, or if the huge stonking digital clock that is right in front of me, that is bright blue, that is so bright that at night when all the lights are out in the house, it looks like there's some sort of alien blue glow in the office. Maybe I'm just not good at the dots and the numbers on either side. Maybe Graham Goodwin, maybe it's just a case that I'm Californian and we're kind of chill and relaxed. And time's
or busy.
Time's not
busy?
Reality, man. It's like a construct put in place by the man trying to keep us down. So, anyways,
it's all about endurance. It's all about endurance. That's what it comes down to. So great question, though.
I look forward to telling you all we have about 20 minutes left at some point here in the next some period of time, and then we will be done, definitely not 20 minutes later. So thanks for calling me out there, Graham, and fair point. And yeah, look, if my imperfections weren't as stout as they are, I'd be a fairly boring person, Mr. Goodwin.
And mate, if that was my worst imperfection, that would be a distinct bonus.
So as we always do, and it's not because it's trite, we don't even write these things down. We say thank you to all of you, and you seem to be growing, not in width like me, but actually in numbers, in volume, with more listeners each week, more questions coming in across Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. Thank you all to those on Reddit who have become an active part of our show, since we have moved to a almost entirely listener-driven Q&A format. Mr. Goodwin here is very kind to take what's become almost normal, minimum 70, 80 questions.
Oh, easy.
Per episode,
easily. And by the way, yeah, I mean, and more coming. I mean, you know, there's other stuff that's been coming in. As soon as I've finished kind of harvesting from one outlet, you go back and there's another couple of questions. So it does seem just to have tickled people's fancy, this format, and I certainly enjoy doing it. It's got to be said. As you know, last week, I'll say again, with apologies to a number of people, we didn't get to questions last week because of obviously the breaking news, the passing of Don Panos. You know, that will be, I'm sure, something. You know, if we do have breaking news, we'll want to get to that. But I think we can certainly say very firmly moving forward, MP, that you know, the listener questions have been of extremely high quality, apart from Sheridan.
Absolutely, and it was also pleasantly reminded listening to the PA system during the IMSA event at Monterey earlier this month that we are, I think, the second listener-driven sports car-based podcast. So, hey, if we're number 2 and number 2, Doing number two. That's actually, I just painted a very different mental picture. If we are number two, not going number two, or doing number two. Maybe that's not too bad. And here we've started off with somehow talk of poop for 2 shows in a row. I don't know what Excellent. Is wrong. What is wrong with me? Before we jump into questions, though, my friend, we had a little something happen last weekend at Sonoma Raceway, not in the world of sports cars, in the world of IndyCar, but it draws back to our show directly, and that was Scott Dixon winning his 5th IndyCar title, which, for any who might have been confused or unconvinced beforehand, he is only behind the amazing Anthony Joseph Foyt, AJ Foyt, on the all-time champions list in IndyCar. And why I'm mentioning IndyCar and Scott Dixon on our Weekend Sports Car show is thanks to our friends at Podbean, who host all of our podcasts, that introduced us to and brought PNC Bank to us for a nice, almost half-year advertising partnership. Well, PNC also sponsors a certain Kiwi by the name of Scott Dixon, who just won that championship. And we have some new ads that will be used for the rest of our advertising partnership this year, where PNC congratulates Scott Dixon. So let's roll into that real quickly, and then we'll come right back and get into listener question. PNC Bank is proud to sponsor the 2018 IndyCar Series champion, Scott Dixon, driver of the number 9 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. Day in, day out, Scott never takes his foot off the gas and is always working to gain a competitive advantage. It's great to see all that hard work pay off. Congratulations, Scott, on your well-earned victory. Copyright 2018, the PNC Financial Services Group, Incorporated. All rights reserved. PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC. To our immense appreciation, we have had other companies, those involved in motor racing by and large, make contact and say, advertising, partnerships, connecting with your audience, that's something we would like to do. So I'm hoping that our 2019 will be one where we're able to bring more good businesses into our little hemisphere and hopefully make your life a little bit more interesting as well with their support of what we're doing. That feeds into one of our other first questions, Graham, and why don't you read that one, because clearly we goofed up names last week too.
We did. It's from DC3, one of our Reddit contributors, says, "Hi, Graham and Marshall." Hi, DC3. Made his week to hear question. Close out the show last episode. Can confirm he's not called Dakota. I suspect it's Douglas. Douglas DC3, Ooh. I suspect. That said, I've certainly had worse nicknames. You were right to suspect the name is from the plane. There you go. Since Scott Dixon, driving for PNC Bank, Chip Ganassi Racing, has now been crowned 2018 IndyCar champion. Why don't more racing teams sponsor the Weekend Sports Cars to ensure success in their respective championships? That's a darn good question. Why don't they?
See, this is why we love our listeners. Well, I'm trying to think. Justice Brothers has been a sponsor this year. I believe it was the month of July that they sponsored us. And they are actually involved with a couple of teams. I believe we see the Justice Brothers logos on the Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac. I believe also on the JDC Miller Motorsports Orekas. And they've won. So in theory, there's been a little bit of good stuff working. And then for the month of May, Bell Racing Helmets was our one of our key sponsors. And granted, it's more on the driver level, but good Lord, they certainly do a heck of a lot of winning with Bell helmeted athletes. So, but yeah, I like where you're going here. We might, Graham, maybe we need to endeavor to have so many names tacked on to the end of the Weekend Sports Cars that it is ridiculous, like one of the various junior category sports car series. We've had the MPC Mazda Prototype Challenge presented by this with support by that, and two guys from over here donated a couple of hamburgers and hot dog in deference to this and also supporting this, that, the other.
There's a slight problem with that, MP, because that would take that 20 minutes. So that 20 minutes you're getting wrong already would get even wronger, more wrong, if we start down that road.
Maybe the show could just be us reading out the show name. And by the time we're done, it'd be about 2 hours and we'd be finished. But
just keep bringing the wheelbarrows of money. That would be nice. I say keep bringing them.
Yeah.
Bring me a wheelbarrow of money.
We're making those big podcast dollars, boys and girls. And we're going to be able to have Graham fly over each week in the Week in Sports Cars G5 Learjet. So that's coming. But all kidding aside, thanks for that question. And I don't want to say that PNC's involvement with the Little Marshall Pruett podcast is what got Scott Dixon the championship, but it sure is pretty cool to see those colors and Dixie have the success that he has earned, knowing that there is a little tie-in there. On the flip side, and I'll go more in depth on this in the Week in IndyCar episode, we did have our podcast, Graham, actually reached the racetrack in a very strange way, and that was from about 2 or 3 weeks ago. IndyCar rookie with the Andretti Autosport team, Zach Veach, when he was my guest, we had a listener, Daniel Ferris, send in a question asking the two of us to pick which superpower we would want and who our sidekick would be. And after giving his answers, I said, well, I'd choose flight like Superman, but since I'd be kind of the biggest, fattest, lamest superhero ever, I probably wouldn't be able to have a sidekick. So just to really sell the lameness of me, I'd probably just fly around holding our cat Rocky in a pink basket, to which Zach said, if someone makes that sticker, I will wear it on my helmet for the Sonoma IndyCar finale. And thanks to our good friends at TorontoMotorsports.com and the artist Roger Warwick, they drew it. And we took some great photos of Zach applying it. And I can't tell you how many folks then sent me photos of Zach in the car at the, on track or wherever with this ridiculous cartoon of me as the world's whitest superhero carrying our cat Rocky in a pink basket. So the good old podcast here has actually, from listener questions, has led to an IndyCar driver carrying a silly sticker, but during an entire weekend and the race. But it truly all came back to a listener question. So,
here's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's another cat-related challenge, because we did have a bit of a worry just after the last week's show, in that listeners will know that both Marshall and I are cat people, and I have two in our house. We have Bear and we have Tango. Tango is known as DSC Cat. Goes back to Petite Le Mans a couple of years ago, when every time she came up onto the sofa for fuss, they threw a yellow. Literally every single time she did it. And she wasn't a very well lady, I'm afraid. Middle-aged cat that she is, and I'm afraid we did think we were going to lose her. Nasty signs from scans, etc. Really, really worried about our little 11-year-old friend. Turned out it was just a big poo.
And we're back to this topic again. How do we keep opening this show?
$1,000 later, it turned out.
We are going to have a non-bowel movement Week in Sports Car episode, folks. I promise you. No matter what, next week it is going to be excrement-free. Can't say that about the quality necessarily, but at least the words. All right, let's move off of number twos and Dookie and whatever else, Graham, and let's at least pretend to be professional sports car writers, reporters, and opinion offerers. Is there a question that might give folks the vaguest feeling that we aren't two complete clowns?
There are so many questions. There's a couple of questions kicking around about GT, asking around whether or not there might be an opportunity to cap spending on GT3/GTD with Evo kits. That's quite a pertinent question, because this week we've seen the unveiling of the new for 2019 Evo version. This one comes from Zedling 111. Would the cost of GTD GT3 be reduced if we allowed Evo kits on older gen GT3 cars, would the SRO even entertain the idea? Well, it's happened. It's happened several times. We saw it way back in the Ferrari 430 days. And there is indeed a kit, though we don't know how much the kit costs, for the Lamborghini Huracan. That will make its the new car will make its debut at Rolex 24 next year. It is a comprehensive re-engineering of that car: new electronics, new dampers, new aero, new engine internals, new lighter weight materials, new electronics, new safety aspects of the roll cage. We are told that it can be reverse engineered onto an existing car. I have to say that's some feat of engineering if you could do all that lot. The overall cost of that car, €389,000 for the new car. No cost yet in terms of the reverse engineered side of things. Can you reverse engineer these things? Can you kind of put an Evo kit together? It has been done on numerous occasions in GT3. Do not confuse that with being a budget item. I can recall way back when we had the Ferrari 430 GTE, and that evolved into the Ferrari 430 Scuderia, which was, I think I'm right, a new engine and new electronics and some tiny aspects of aero, and that succeeded for, from memory, and this is some while ago in the days of Ferrari 430, €155,000 at a time when Martin Short at Roll Centre Racing, at the time responsible for marketing the Mosler in the UK, told us for €20,000 more than it cost you to put a new engine, a bit of new electronics, and a bit of new carbon on your car, you can have a brand new Mosler for €175,000. And all the Scuderia managed to do was to make the car less reliable, albeit slightly quicker. So it is an ongoing issue to do with GT3. We know that SRO are looking into this new GT2 concept. We are still waiting for anybody to put their heads above the parapets, and I'm tracking a couple of stories there, not just about the potential manufacturers that might, but also whether or not there's going to be space for them in one or two of the places where it's been implied that we might see them the next year.
We did see a great announcement that there will be one new team so far coming into IMSA's GT Daytona category next year. And I have to admit, Graham, that it was the kind of thing I'd been hoping for. And we weren't totally shocked to read that More Speed would be coming in with a new Porsche to do that. But it really, I think it sends a much needed message at the right time. Not saying it's a cure-all. This is all coming back to the topic of costs. GT3, as most people know, has reached a point to where whatever its origins and intentions were, it's become just so incredibly expensive, especially on the IMSA side, to compete and campaign across 24 hours here, 12 hours there, all the regular rounds back and forth across the country. It is something where we've seen the numbers drop a little bit throughout the season. So it was really good to see that More Speed has opted to come in with Will Hardman next year to participate in GTD. What I don't know is if that is going to be an exception, that we might have, whether we have just one team, this Texas-based outfit deciding, okay, I'm going to get in. And this is coming after, we lost Change Racing. We've seen a little bit of numerical reduction in GTD on this end with all the GT3-based machinery. So, not only do I like the question, I'm hoping more of that thinking goes on. Obviously, with GT3 being a global platform that IMSA uses, like it's done with its prototypes, I think the more IMSA asks, are there things we can do in our region, in our championship, that I'm not saying would stray so much in a technical standpoint, but can we reduce, whether it's the number of events, can we do something to make sure that we actually have a thriving Pro-Am GT class that is, in theory, preparing drivers and teams to maybe move up instead of just move out and, say, go to World Challenge with the same exact cars, where the costs are definitely, can be a lot lower. So maybe a little bit of a bigger picture question there than just strictly costs and Evo kits and whatnot. But it's something I know you and I are monitoring on a regular basis to see where that health is or is not.
Well, but also on the kind of GTD, actually in this case more GT3 thing, we had the season finale for the Blancpain Sprint Cup last weekend, and whilst yes, titles were won, Dakar ASP with Mercedes AMG, Cielo and Michael Meadows, no doubt the headlines were taken not by the winner but by the loser, and that was Grasser Racing Team, disqualified from the meeting, their number 63 car, after a couple of extraordinary incidents, but particularly the one that is gathering people's attention. Jackie Fahy asking a question about this one was Christian Engelhardt, that was disqualified from the meeting and may well be in further trouble after being pictured on camera loosening belts, taking off glove, I believe after the checkered flag for race one, but then removing the SD card from the telltale camera in the car and breaking it. I think that is going to leave Christian in some deep trouble. He has already taken sanction from the organising body. He has been reported to his National Motorsport Association. In this case, it's a DMSB in Germany. And what do I think? I think the rules are there for a reason. You break the rules, there's a sanction. You do that, that's just downright silly. I suspect he thought he was covering up his mistake. That wasn't the smartest move I've seen from any race driver. And do I think a sanction is justified? I absolutely do. I think, for me, if it was me, MP, I think a ban should be coming.
This would have been perfect if he'd tried to do this, I would say, even 20 years ago. But we live in an era where, good Lord, man, you seemingly cannot walk out of the house, maybe even be inside your house, with folks knowing your current GPS position, what you said, who you said it to, what you had for lunch. Our lives are so heavily documented by choice and just by possibility of others. It's a bit crazy to have someone believe that they could do these things inside of a race car, where you're should be fairly well aware that there's at least one camera. Could be something documenting your moves and movements. When I heard about this for the first time, Graham, I just said, wow, is this guy like from the past? Did he import himself somehow from 1970 something and was unaware that documentation is kind of all we do? You know, we lift up our phones how many times a day to take a picture of something, to talk into it, to do a FaceTime, to do this. Everything that gets tagged, seemingly has some sort of geolocation information, blah, blah, blah. It just stood out as, man, you watch any crime show today, and it's like, well, he tried to clean up the crime scene, but there were still some hairs or DNA. There's no way you can truly mask all of your moves. This just seemed to be completely daft to me. Like, brother, did you not know? Of course, they're watching you.
It's the odd thing, and it's been spotted by, I just spotted the other question, it's from First Time question at Motorsport Picks on, I think that's one that's come through Twitter, who said that there were indeed several incidents with the team and that particular car through the weekend, including hands device over the belts, all sorts of other shenanigans going on. There was just something going horribly wrong there this last weekend. I've heard all sorts of things that may or may not have happened after the flag. I think we'll find out in due course whether or not something's coming his way. Their sanction was very simple. They were eliminated from the meeting, and an outside chance of actually taking the title went with it. So that didn't pay off, did it? For me, safety, my view on safety. It comes down to this. If there's a regulation there and you're caught breaking it, there's going to be a sanction. In this case, didn't just break it once, broke it at least two or three times, and then to actually go around trying to cover up the evidence, that's just dumb, to be honest with you. That's just not smart. And I think on reflection, Christian Engelhardt, who I'm told this is, by the way, not remotely in his character, will either have an explanation as to why he did it, or will look back and think that was a million billion miles from my finest hour.
Let's see, where shall we go? Let's find something IMSA-ish, and that's one of the other fun things which we are grateful for. The questions tend to fly from IMSA, WC, Blancpain, you name it. And so, yeah, let's fly around a little bit, and we're having to look through 11 pages. No joke. 11 pages of questions you have
in 12 points.
And yeah, and trying to fit.
What about this one for you? What about this one for you? This one for you there, MP, from Ed Joris. If and when the ACO develops and selects vendors for the next LMP2 standard, will the IMSA DPI cars have to be updated as well? If Dallara loses an LMP2 sanction, would Cadillac have to partner with someone else? Would IMSA soldier on with a vintage LMP2 chassis? I'm asking at what point there will be a clean break between IMSA and ACO regarding LMP2 and DPI. I think it's one we've dealt with before in the round, isn't it?
But it's I like the way that's phrased, though, Ed. I am waiting for the official announcement from the ACO and FIWEC on their next set of prototype regulations, what we have dubbed car on the Weekend Sports Cars. Whatever it is, hypercar, car, GTP, who knows, WSC, whatever. I'm just waiting for that official announcement to come out, so it can be followed by an official announcement from the friends at Daytona Beach at IMSA congratulating the ACO and the WEC on their fine new regulations, wishing them well in those endeavors, and stating that they will continue as planned all along with the next generation DPI, currently set for 2022, which, as we mentioned last week and I mentioned before, Graham, is also expected to have an off-the-shelf energy recovery system of some sorts to add 100, 150 horsepower, whatever the number ends up being. But announcement from our friends in France, followed by an announcement from Florida saying, thumbs up, good luck, we're going to keep motoring down the path we are on, and I fully expect that to continue with Dallara, with any of the manufacturers that are currently involved. What I don't know is whether that would include IMSA saying, and hey, if you're not among the 4 that have been in the game, the official game, the only 4 allowed since 2017, come talk, because we would like to have you here. Could it be name the variety of brands that might want to get in? That's the only question where I don't have a feel, Graham, because I haven't asked. So I will certainly ask that next opportunity that I get. But yeah, Ed, regardless of what happens in France, those Dallara-based Cadillacs, I believe, unless Cadillac/GM Racing decides to go with a different partner, would still be Dallaras in whatever 2022 iteration. And if someone wants to team up with a Riley Multimatic, which is now, by then would probably just be titled Multimatic, since they're the only brand involved, wanted to do something there, then they would, etc. So I don't see a reduction unless a manufacturer pulls out and says, hey, we're done. But I would only expect to see IMSA say, hey, we're doing our own thing and it's working. And if you guys, but I also expect the same payment to happen between IMSA, or from IMSA to France, to open up the door to the automatic invites for the various class champions in IMSA each year. And in those instances, those people would need to either bring a car that complies that they own, or rent one, or take part in buy seats in someone else's team. So that's
remember that's something that has changed, albeit a little subtly, in the regulations, which is making sure that it's understood that the entries, the 2 Gentleman Trophy entries, if you like, one from GTD and one from LMP2, as is expressed, are going explicitly to the driver and not the team. So it would be the driver that wins that trophy that gets the entry and not the team moving forward. That now explicitly in the regulations, and a change that came fairly recently. I think the other thing we could say here, MP, is whatever happens, of course, if and I think you're right, IMSA are going to make that decision, that determination to carry on down their own road. The one aspect of that which absolutely would have to follow suit with that, because it's the reason why they're doing it, is that if you did have legacy manufacturers staying in or another manufacturer allowed in, then the cost control would have to be there as well, because that's an absolutely key component of what has made DPI the success that it's been to this point. So there's almost no point in following down their own road if you're not going to keep that as actually part of the componentry, the building blocks of the DPI concept when we get to, well, let's call it DPI 2, which comes along in just a few years' time.
Amen.
Got a couple of bits and bobs around GTE, some questions about Corvette, some questions about some stuff that's doing the rounds at the moment about Toyota potentially getting involved in GTE, GTLM, and also Aston Martin. I'll name check a couple of the questioners in a moment, because unfortunately, for various reasons, I've not organised this list particularly well. But on Aston Martin, the question came in around whether or not plans were progressing for GTLM in IMSA with Aston Martin. I can tell you that they are still undertaking their search for a partner in North America. I expect it to be probably a reasonably low-key start. We do understand that likely it is that Paul Dell'Anna is one of the first customers for the new generation GTE/GTLM car, is likely to debut his car at the Rolex 24 at Daytona. He won't be able to enter that, of course, in the latter part of the season in the WEC. You can't enter the new Aston Martin until after Le Mans 24 Hours. It was Adam Bowman, by the way, that was asking about Aston Martin and GTLM program. So on that front, MP, I don't know what you know about who they've been talking to. I certainly got a couple of ideas about who they've been talking to, but that process is progressing, is not done yet. And I suspect what we're seeing there with Aston is still very firmly the intent, but it's important for them to get it right rather than do it quickly.
I have nothing for you on this, and I apologize, because despite
That's all right.
having been ensconced in sports car racing for 2 out of the last 4 weekends, my brain tilted so heavily towards IndyCar in the season finale that there are a couple of threads like this that I haven't done a very good job of staying on top of. But that's why this isn't me talking for 2 hours. It's you.
Well, here's one you might know more about, because I don't. My knowledge on this one is about a year or so out of date now. It comes from Pineus, I think it is, another one of our Redditeers. When will Lexus move to GTLM?
I haven't heard anything about that, and I don't.
Other than it was supposed to be being evaluated according to other reports, then utterly denied by Lexus in the aftermath of that.
Yeah,
but no, it's been quiet, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, and at least for what I know, short term, I have not heard anything that leads me to believe a change of class is happening. I did write about a change in vendor that is expected to happen from 3GT moving over to the Vassar-Sullivan racing program. I don't know how much we went into that last week, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself here. Try and give you guys stuff when possible that maybe wasn't on the printed page. So I'd heard about this. Actually, Graham, let me go back even further. When the original request for proposals went out in, I think, 2015 or so. Heck, it might have even been 2016, but I think it was 2015. The Vassar and Sullivan side, in particular, with the KVSH IndyCar team, Vassar being the V in it, Sullivan being the SH in it. The V and the SH of KVSH went after the Lexus contract very hard. I'm told that they were among the genuine last couple of finalists and did not ultimately get it. Although the KVSH team has gone away in IndyCar, Vassar and Sullivan are still active. They've come back this year. They're partnering with Dale Coyne in IndyCar, but unaffiliated with that, they have had a desire, Graham, to do something on their own again. And from everything I have heard, in particular at the Monterey IMSA round, almost right off the bat, brother. I mean, kind of the minute I got there, put all my crap down in the media center, walked out to the paddock. I had one person who had been probably the number one and most accurate source of Lexus movement. I won't mention who they're involved with, but I'll tell you later and you'll have a bit of a laugh. But that person said, hey, I have heard on very good authority that it's a done deal with the Lexus GTD program moving to Vassar and Sullivan. And again, I knew that they were desiring to get a hold of it this time around, but I didn't know how serious it would be. I'd also mention, while 3GT's team owner might not have a lot of people sending Christmas cards his way, whether you like or dislike whichever person at 3GT, it's the on-track performances that matter. And that Lexus program this year has been incredibly strong. Started off the season a little bit soft. I wouldn't say, Graham, that was necessarily on them. I would say that IMSA, with their BOP, has found a spot with the Lexus RCF GT3s that just about everywhere they have gone since Mid-Ohio, which is the third round for them. They weren't at Long Beach as they were last year, but the first couple of rounds weren't too pleasant at Daytona and Sebring, but by Mid-Ohio, you look at the finishes that they have earned. They had the breakthrough win for the car in IMSA in Mid-Ohio in May. After that, they were sixth at Detroit, had a second at CTMP/Mosport, seventh at Lime Rock, sixth at Road America, won again at VIR. The team, I mean, that's from the leading car in the championship, that of Dominic Baumann and Kyle Marcelli. You jump down to Jack Hawksworth in the sister car. First of all, he has 3 poles this year, and fourth place, a fifth place, a fourth, a fifth. I mean, the blue and red Lexuses, is it Lexus? I'm not sure, dear readers. Please tell us how to use Lexus in the plural. Those cars have been featuring very heavily, and I would say, Graham, that without the bad start to the year at Daytona and Sebring, instead of them sitting fifth in GTD, they would be much farther up, maybe seriously contending for a championship. So you don't do that if your team is garbage, if your drivers aren't executing at a high level, etc., etc. I just mention all this because while hearing that, hey, the first contract is coming to a conclusion, we're doing our due diligence, as every major manufacturer does, in talking and requesting proposals from other teams, I fully expected it to go back to 3GT, based on nothing other than results. And so hearing, not just from that first person on the paddock, but it seemed like about every fifth step was someone pulling me aside. Hey, did you hear? This program's moving over to here. And the other thing I tried to do is, sometimes all it takes, Graham, as you know, is one person saying something to a lot of people, and then you get a lot of people telling you something. And instead of it being 4 or 5 people providing independent confirmation that something is happening, it's really just an echo chamber of one person who's spoken to a number of people and you hearing the same thing being fed back. So if we're talking sources, you have to do a little bit of work sometimes to figure out if I'm just hearing the same thing that has spread, or if I'm hearing this from people independently who would know on their own. And so I went and sought out a few other people who... That's a great point. I mean, we have seen, haven't we? We've seen this in recent weeks with a range of stories, the erroneous stories that doing the rounds about car. Yes, and you're going to get to that in just a moment. So just to wrap this, I went and sought out some folks who I knew had no connection and would not have spoken with with the others, and definitely came away feeling very confident in writing a story that, while it isn't confirmed, we would not be surprised to see Vassar Sullivan in charge of this program going forward. So take all that, wrap it all up, Graham, and the only thing I've heard involves GTD with a little bit of the background that I offered here. And just one other, maybe a little quick funny. So I've known Jimmy Vassar since I was 18. I'm 47. I've known James Sully Sullivan for not nearly as long, but we have a pretty close relationship. I rang the two of them. They didn't answer. And when they don't answer, they usually know I'm calling about something that they don't want to talk about. But they know I would probably know, therefore they don't pick up. So I rang their veteran PR man and said, hey, I heard this thing. Could you, since the boys aren't picking up for me, could you call them and at least get me a good lie or a denial or whatever it is? And he rang back and gave me a quote of, we have nothing to report at this time, and then said, Vassar's original comment was, no comment. But then he said Vassar realized that kind of sounded like people could easily,
yes,
that sounded like a
doing
confirmation. So please change that to we have nothing to report. So anyways, just a little bit of fun, maybe a little bit of the inside baseball part of what we do for fun there. But I've heard nothing about a GTD thing being imminent. I've only heard about GTD going forward in a new contract. We've told you, I think we might have been the first to mention, however long ago, that the DPI exploration was officially canned. So if there were to be a GTLM effort, maybe something in that, if not Supra, but whatever the Lexus equivalent of that would be, maybe that could be the direction.
Well, I can add to that, because oddly enough, that we're going to come straight to that from a question from David Schutz. Do we expect to see a GTE Toyota Supra effort before the end of the Super season? No. There's some stories doing the rounds, I think, out of New Zealand and Australia with a senior member of Toyota Gazoo Racing, which is, of course, the racing arm of the Toyota Corporation now, suggesting that they might be looking at a GTE version, or at least an all-track version of the Supra GT car. It's a shared platform with BMW, the new car. I am as certain as I can be that at the moment there is no live program for a GTE Toyota Supra. Neither is there full evaluation of a live program. I think there are lots and lots of people that would quite like us to believe that there is. But at the moment, I believe that that's not the case. Certainly no chance at all, David, for that to come forward before the end of the Super season. And I don't believe we're going to see it next year either. Lots of interest in what's going on with GTE in the questions this week. Not a lot moving forward. One thing that is, though, moving forward comes from Tom Bacon. And he asks, is Corvette Racing's entry into the Shanghai WEC race precursor to a full season campaign in 2019-2020? This is all to do with, if you're not aware, that there will be a one-off entry for a C7R. Corvette Racing entered car for the Shanghai round. It's all tied in with Chinese backers. Quite whether or not there'll be impact of what's going on at the moment in world trade with that remains to be seen. But the answer there is it has long been a target of the FIWC and the ACO to attract General Motors. I say attract, strong-arm General Motors into entering the WEC. That's had, we've debated it on this show before, MP, haven't we, about the impact that may or may not have had in the past, about the deal that they get in terms of BOP at the Le Mans 24 Hours. So the answer there is yes, they'd like to do it. We know that Library Competition in the past have debated whether or not there might be an opportunity to field a GTE Pro car. We wait to see what actually happens with what the weapon of choice is going to be for next year, next season. And of course, next season means two different things, whether or not you're talking about IMSA and whether or not you're talking about the WEC, because there is a 6-month gap between those two. And certainly you're not going to see any change this season for what is fielded by anybody in GTE Pro or indeed GTE AM. Whether or not you see it next season, well, they've not got that long to actually make those kind of announcements, have they, MP?
Not at all. I've heard rumor, I don't know if you have. Maybe you can tell me if this has made it across the Atlantic. I've heard rumor there might be a Corvette with an engine that isn't in the front coming. Have you? I mean, I know it's wild. Yes.
No.
I've pulled that out of my backside yet again. But possibly, maybe, I don't know. A rear engine. Now that would be awesome, wouldn't it? Even Porsche has taken their rear engine 911 and made it rear mid or whatever they want to call it. Wouldn't it be awesome if Corvette just said, you know what, we feel bad. There's no longer a true rear engine car in GTLM/GTE. We are going to be the ones to solve it. Then all of a sudden, exactly. Then all of a sudden we hear about, folks talking about, man, this thing just squats down. Boy, it puts down the power great, but I tell you, it's like it's like a box. It's square and it's trying to spin on you all the time. And anyways, flying lizards could become the factory racing team. Cats and dogs could live together peacefully. The world would just be upside down or backwards, something like that. I've failed to take my medication, by the way, today, and I'm drinking without pills.
It shows.
So hey, look at that. Should we take a little break here and just we're only a little over 40 minutes and 20 minutes to go. Graham, 20 minutes to go.
Just 20 minutes to go.
Yes, just 20 minutes to go in this 2-hour episode that's only at 40 minutes. I love it. I'm going to keep saying that from now on. Let's not take a break. We need to go a little bit further, and then we'll take a break and hear a word from PNC Bank and their new champion driver. But I guess I just did a mini promo right there myself, even though it wasn't the formal one. Okay, I'm going to cut down on my crack. Where should we go next, my friend?
Well, we're going to have a couple of questions. I don't know the answer. You may. My guess is it's been extremely busy for IMSA. It's been extremely busy for you. A couple of people asking, including Alex Eichmiller, has been in news if there'll be a Don Panos tribute of any sort at Petit Le Mans. I strongly expect there will be some reflection on the life of Don Panos at Petit Le Mans. Quite right that there should be. That was indeed a race of, his determination. We've not heard any news yet, but I strongly suspect because of where it is, because of what it is, because of who he was, then there will be an opportunity for those, and I'm sure they will be legion, that want to reflect on the life and times of Dr. Don, that there will be the opportunity to do that at the Petit Le Mans meeting. I know we've been asked to see if we can help with images for some memories for Don, for memorial. I've done that happily. I've sent dozens and dozens of images from the DSC boys and girls down through the years with some fabulous images of the absolutely astonishing cars that Don put together. I had a happy half an hour, 45 minutes trawling through YouTube the end of last week and found some incredible stuff that I hadn't seen before, including some wonderful stuff done by Panos LLC for the 20th anniversary of the marque, and put together a bit of a YouTube show on that front, including some in-car down through the years, starting with the Roadster S and coming through to the current GT4 car, and lots of the programming featuring Don himself, including Jay Leno's garage, looking at the Esperanti GTLM road car. I loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed watching it again. I've had some very nice words back from the lovely ladies and gentlemen at Panos LLC. If you've not seen that Delhi Sports Car, take a look. Get yourself a coffee or an adult beverage and just enjoy half an hour of memories of those fantastic automobiles.
Absolutely. I'd certainly hope, Graham, that we do have more than just tribute stickers and such. Maybe Thursday night after qualifying, that might even be a little bit, or Thursday evening, Friday evening, something up on the hill, the paddock above, the hill above the paddock. It would be great to see IMSA or the Road Atlanta track, a place that was just synonymous with Don, not just because he bought it and renovated it, but that's where his racing teams were based for so long. Love to see them put up some sort of screen, large screen that they could project onto, and whether it's show some old races where Don's cars won, or you name it, some sort of public celebration of the man, because at least, now granted, the first time I went there was 94, and this is before Don owned it. I can tell you how much of a backwards, backwoods, kind of carved into the countryside type, very low fidelity circuit it was, at least from a fan enjoyment standpoint. And then what it was like coming back after Don bought the place and really did make it into something modern that we could enjoy. So I am positive that IMSA will go absolutely above and beyond any measure of expectation. And also knowing that Scott Atherton, IMSA president, was Don's right-hand man for 15 plus years. So, while Don might not have been a part of IMSA the last couple of years after selling the ALMS and his tracks, and then stepping aside from, I guess, the senior management or advisory board, good Lord, he's still a huge part of what IMSA is today. So I'm sure they will take good care of him, and for all of us who will be there to enjoy and to celebrate the man. Where shall we go next, my friend?
Well, I've got a nice one here, and in fact, the other person that was asking about that reflection is another one of our Reddit questioners, Bonnie Lass 47, and actually says that prefaces what she describes as her likely naive questions with the explanation she's very new to motorsports, having spent most of the last 30 years immersed in equestrian sport, eventing. Really good question here. Notice that several recent accidents resulted in drivers with broken legs. Would it be possible for drivers to wear a full bodysuit to inflate on impact to offer them additional protection, a sort of wearable airbag, a little like, I guess, the MotoGP guys do with their spine protectors? Equestrian does something of the sort, wearing a vest that inflates when the rider is tossed off a horse. There were some changes, weren't there, in the cockpit area, in the area to protect the legs. That's why the accident that damaged Pietro Fittipaldi's legs was such a surprise, if you like, because there is now padding that stops drivers' legs from hitting sharp or blunt objects if the legs are rattled around in the footwell. That came some little while ago. In fact, oddly enough, as I'm reading down here, actually another questioner actually does refer to that. It is something that, we always learn these lessons, don't we, from another accident. We had this some years ago with LMP cars where they were taking off, and what you're getting then was spinal injuries with the impact, with the way which the seat was mounted in the car and where the car was coming down, the shock being transferred up through the seat. That led to changes in seating position. We're looking at that again. We've got things like the new roof hatches that allow help with extrication of drivers and immobilizing spine and neck. The reality is that you learn lessons when things go wrong. And I think it would be very easy to be completely wise after every single event. But unfortunately, life keeps throwing things at you. And, if you're actually putting in new safety systems, whether they're trackside or in car, life seems to find new and extraordinary ways to hurt you, doesn't it, MP?
Yeah. And there were some questions as to the severity of the impact that Pietro suffered. For example, we saw some private photos shortly after, and it looked like the tub just came apart, and it was just horrific. Then also, got a little bit of further advisement that they had to use the jaws of life. I know that's a colloquialism, but whatever the correct term is, basically the big high-powered hydraulic jaws to cut away certain parts and pieces from the tub, which made it look like it had truly collapsed in on itself in and around the lower extremities of where Pietro's body was in the car. But yeah, I know, at least from the IndyCar side, there has been a lot of tub modification in recent years. Almost seems like on an annual basis, Graham, where IndyCar says, hey, you guys need to strip down your Dallara DW12 tubs, absolute bare, and send them over to Aerodyne because you're going to add in additional cladding on the side. The Xylon anti-intrusion panels, for example, that is something that there's only more and more of that has been placed alongside the cockpit and then even down alongside the driver's legs to prevent things piercing. I am less knowledgeable on how much those requirements have been increased. If we're talking prototype tubs, in whether it's P1 or P2, but I think we have a situation where the relatively compact length of suspension on the front of most prototypes, I think that could be a little something to think about in terms of protection. If we think about an average open wheel crash, well, granted, in Formula One with carbon fiber suspension pieces, those tend to break away or break, and then with the tethers in place, will swing in whichever direction, but not so much of a punching scenario into the tub. With at least LMP1 and even LMP2, we have gone away from any kind of wide suspension dimensionally, so that the distance between the sides of the tub, whether the driver's on the left or the right, and the suspension sitting out a ways in a crash, that possibly being broken and swung away from the tub. Now, because there's so little distance between the wheel hub, upright, brakes, and suspension and such, and the tub mounting, it seems like almost any impact that involves braking suspension involves punching into the tub, because it's just not sitting that far out to break away and swing. Not saying that this is any kind of like, hey, there's the key issue here, but just so much of what seems to happen is, if there, at least recently, is if there is a hard impact involving one of the front wheel and suspension assemblies, that, it tends to punch right into the tub and puts the strength and integrity of the pieces meant to protect the drivers, puts that to the test. So I don't know if there's a corrective change here so much, or if it's just a case of adding more cladding, but definitely something to be pondered.
Absolutely right. And, like you say, there have been these progressive changes. These Xylon anti-intrusion panels have made a massive contribution. Is it ever going to be entirely safe? Well, the answer is probably not, and that's probably right that it should be so. Not that we want to see people hurt, but the fact is there is inherent risk in stretching the boundaries of technology and adhesion and aerodynamics and everything involved with motorsport, and particularly in the other major area in your life, MP, the IndyCar scene. Yeah, it really is very, very edgy indeed at times, isn't it? It's a kind of parallel question of a completely different subject, but actually, it, oddly enough, crosses into.
Let's stay here for just a sec, and this is just a general note that's lightly affiliated to the question. Witnessed an interesting thing last weekend. It wasn't the first time, but it definitely stood out to me. And it does speak to just changing times. There were a variety of support series that were part of the IndyCar schedule. We had IMSA's Porsche GT3 Cup cars out there. We had vintage Trans Am. We had a small Formula car support series and whatnot. Sitting in the media center for some of those non-IndyCar sessions, really interesting. And not in a good way interesting for me, but again, maybe I'm old and harsher minded. We had a variety of crashes and spins throughout the weekend. We had someone go off in turn 2 in one of the Pro Mazda smaller Formula cars, and there was some smoke coming from the back of the car. It could have been a very small fire. Cars clashing and one getting hit and breaking a wing or a nose, breaking suspension. The reaction that I heard, and this is from members of the media, you would, if you just closed your eyes and did not look up at the screen to see what the reactions were, oh, ha, ha, you would think multiple cars were barrel rolling down the track on fire, exploding. But the reality was, even small crashes, things where, again, if you've been around maybe long enough and have seen a lot of crashes to know, okay, that sucks for the crew. They're going to have a busy afternoon, but that's fine. Hey, maybe the driver, hurt their wrist if they didn't get their hands off the steering wheel. but these are all fairly truly, Graham, unremarkable. And yet, it seems like, I realize I'm using only the media as a sample size, but it just seems like the reaction to such things, some of us have become so hypersensitive that anything, if there's a little bit of smoke coming up, if there's some broken parts, whatever, there's a completely different tone. And maybe it's coming off of Robert Wicken's scary crash. Maybe it's a Pietro Fittipaldi again. We've seen some folks get hurt from some very bad crashes. But what has struck me is, and I've seen this more and more, Sonoma wasn't the only time. It's the first of probably a dozen or more times over the last year or two where just routine crashes seem to land with more folks than ever as, oh my God, oh, woo. And I don't know why, because it comes back to your point, and this is what just triggered the memory, Graham, of motor racing's inherently dangerous. It would be very odd if 30, 20, however many cars on track, on a 2-mile track, 3-mile track, aren't running into one another on occasion. If drivers aren't goofing up and getting their braking point wrong or losing the back of the car and heading into the barriers. It's not as if we're ever happy when that happens, but at the same time, there just seems to be this growing thing I've noticed, at least within the media, that whenever the slightest thing happens, there's a reason to panic or overreact. And it just strikes me as very odd, Graham, that for whatever reason, maybe it's isolated, but for whatever reason, there's appears to be a growing sensation of anything is, oh my God, worthy, instead of relax, people. You can tell the bad ones. Not everything involving an off-track excursion
you most certainly can.
needs to be
you and I
that way.
Yeah, you and I have stood there with microphones attached to our heads or in our hands and have had to respond to real drama emerging. And at times, I can remember a couple of times where I've had to actually stifle an expletive with a microphone in my hand. The one I can remember, a horrific incident for Stefan Ortelli at Monza, where the rear wing failed on his Oreca LMP1 car, and he barrel rolled over the top. And by over the top, I mean like a foot over the top of Alan Whitnish's Audi in the first chicane before rolling the thing. It was like an air crash. It really was. And that was a horrific accident. As it turned out, he had a minor ankle injury as a result of that, but which is just completely remarkable. But you're right, it is that kind of overreaction. I'm not a fan of media chasing ambulances at all. It is quite correct that when there is reason for concern, that needs to be followed up and reported upon for all sorts of reasons. But, I'm not a fan, for instance, of races and championships publicising their wares by an endless stream of crash videos. That's not what the sport is about, and I don't believe that's what most people come to watch, to see, and to, frankly, to hope for. It is part of the environment of motorsport. It is part of the nature of the beast that is motorsport. But what it's about is racing. What it's about is actually these men and women actually getting the best performance they can out of the machine that they're provided with, often literally wheel to wheel. And they're the moments that have me on my toes, standing up out the chair. And, you'll hear it in an elevated pitch in my voice for any race I'm talking about. And happily, we're in an era that we do still see that. The fact that we talk week in, week out about the fact that on the WEC at the moment we're not getting that with LMP1 at the sharp end, has been the exception to the rule in my time doing what I do. And I'm extremely pleased that that's the case. I watch at times IndyCar with wonder. Yes, it's got a rule set that actually supports that close racing. But that, for me, MP, you tell me if I'm wrong, that's what does it for me. It's close racing. I don't want to see cars damaged, and I certainly don't want to see people hurt.
Very true. And maybe just to close this, my little note or soapboxiness here, it's driven from a place that actually just realized goes back to childhood. My father told me that when I was very young, I was climbing all over everything. And if I was unsupervised, if there was a tree, I'd try to go right up the thing. And he said my mother, her instincts were to run over and pull me down. Say, no, 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 don't do that. It's dangerous. You could hurt yourself. And he said he saw that happen a couple of times and decided to have a conversation with my mother. And this isn't speaking negatively of her. It's just he told me about how this parental dynamic played out. He's pulled her aside and said, please stop doing that. And to which she said, but, again, I was their only child. He could, hurt himself, land on his head, etc. He said, yes, I get that. But if every time he does something where he's exploring and doing something that's a little bit risky, we'll keep an eye on him. If we see him failing, we'll walk over and say, hey, pal, you need a hand? You need a little lift? Something? But other than that, if you are teaching him that every time he does something that is a little bit curious, risky, or otherwise, there's immediate overreaction. Oh, let's go, come here, you can get hurt. You're going to set this kid up to be afraid of everything, overreact to everything, treat everything like it could hurt him. It's a bad precedent. And that was essentially his message. Do not, if you see the kid about to kill himself, step in, obviously. But other than that, don't overreact when you see him doing things that are part and parcel of learning the world and trying things out. And I think that, Graham, might be just the thing that comes back to me here. If, as members of the media or even fans, we drastically overreact, oh my God, 2 cars crashed. Yes, that's what happens sometimes. If we're constantly overreacting, I think we're building a wider narrative for the world that racing is this big, scary thing. And, it's lethal and other people should be scared of it too. That's when we start getting in this area where we can no longer have nice things because we've created this false narrative or panic that racing is this big, bad, dangerous thing. So maybe this is a really weird thing drawing back to my childhood, but that's kind of what comes to mind when I was watching the simplest of crashes and people treating it like the world was on fire.
Oddly enough, there's a kind of parallel again. It just goes seamlessly, doesn't it? It's from Kevin Perez Frederico. Hey, MP and MGG, you guys were always down. Indeed. You guys were always down on motorsports being too spec and constricted by BOP, which is true for the most part, but there's still amazing series that are open in terms of rule books like hill climb, time attack, and drifting. How come you guys don't find those types of cars and racing compelling from the rules and competition standpoint? It's a fair point. I will say this. I am mesmerized by, in particular, Pikes Peak and some of the top European hill climbs by the speed and skill and just general bonkersness of what goes on in those events. I'm not as... I almost said something I was going to regret there about drifting.
Say it.
But drifting to me, it is hugely skillful, don't get me wrong. Incredibly specialist. But for me, it's the WWE of motorsports. And what do I mean by that? It's done from the position of pure entertainment and gives up a little something in doing that. Time attack, somewhere in between the two. Don't get me wrong, I would sit trackside and watch any of this for an afternoon anywhere you care to choose to do it. But it's like a lot of other things in motorsports. There are motorsports events I would travel across the world to see and to cover. There are those that I would get in the car because I've been invited along to have the opportunity to do so. There's those that if they were on, I would sit and watch. And there's those that I might put on in the background on the TV and do my ironing on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon. But there's a big division. It's a bit like asking what flavour of ice cream you like, isn't it, really? The answer, by the way, is all of them, with the exception... Yeah, all of them. So the answer there is a pretty predictable one. I'll give you a parallel here.
Garlic ice cream.
Coming away.
Garlic ice cream.
I've had garlic ice cream.
Gilroy is the garlic capital of the world.
I've been to Gilroy, and I've been
not all.
The Stinking Rose in San Francisco. What a place that is.
Oh, the best.
Absolutely. But I'll give you a parallel with this. Coming away from the extraordinary Asia Le Mans Series race, which happens on Family Day, Children's Day in the Kingdom of Thailand, where we get something like 100,000 people turning out for an Asia Le Mans Series race, because there is a tradition that you take your kids out for the day and they throw a great big party in the paddock for that. But on the evening there, they do have motorcycle drag races on a dedicated track, which is the least well-prepared drag strip you've ever seen in your life. But it's run for the local kids, and it's run by the local police. And that was done to keep these kids off the road in dangerous circumstances. And some of these bikes are pretty, hot stuff, and some of them really aren't. Some of them are the kind of things that, are way worse than the local fart can that you'll actually get down on the twist and go mopeds. But these kids are out there and having fun. And you know what?
That's our first hashtag of the
Absolutely.
day. Hashtag fart can.
I sat there at 11 o'clock at night on the bonnet of my car and just watched these guys for 40 minutes. It was fascinating stuff. It was real pure joy, and a bit of youth culture to go with it. And congratulations to those local organisers and police officers for arranging for that to happen. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people competing and probably thousands of people watching. And it was a joyful scene, not in any way threatening at all, despite the fact I was probably the oldest person there by a good 30 years or more. And certainly was the only one there with a new silver Toyota Corolla. But it's a joyful thing, and that's what motorsport should be. And for me, we can have a crack. I can have a crack at Formula One. I'm going to have one in a moment about another question that's come up here. But I do that because actually what I want it better. I want it to be better. I want it to be more inclusive. I want it to be more exciting. I want it to be less bounded by convention. I want it to be less just wrong. And I take joy in what I can get from my sports, and I will be, I hope, constructively critical when aspects of that come forward that don't seem to make sense. You've had that, haven't you, MP, with the debate we've had about IMSA and the WEC and ACO about new prototype regulations. We've had it around the kind of the projected track with GT regulations. It's not because we just want to sit and throw stones. It's because we want it to be done better. There is little or no motorsport that I wouldn't spend time, given the opportunity, sitting and watching and learning a little bit more about. I will never be a fan of all of it. I will be interested to some degree in all of it. And, I think you make a very good point, Kevin, about those areas of motorsport which have a rather more open rule book. You said it before, MP. It's something we're losing in North American motorsport, where that car you've built yourself with the guys in the garage around a tube frame, this or that or the other, is going away. And that's something we should be concerned about. It is becoming a little bit more saccharine. It is becoming a little bit more spec. In no small part, that has come for commercial reasons and for safety reasons. It's difficult to argue with either on one point, but it would be nice to see it just being left open somewhere for someone to come out with what it was they drew on the back of their exercise book at school at 9, that when they get to 19 or 29 and they've actually got the time, the inclination, the skill set to do it, that there's an opportunity for them to race that.
And I would say, I would almost term it the Amazonification of racing, Graham. Amazon.com rules our country, both with their sales of products, but now even with television, or I should say streaming through Amazon Prime. But I'd say there's definitely an Amazonification angle to this too. Hey, wait a minute, so I could just click a button and get a race car and go drive it? Cool. And it's like all the other race cars? Well, cool. Then I don't really have to know a lot or as much. I don't have to have a wide skill set. I don't know how need to know how to fabricate, don't need to master suspension geometry because I've only got 2 or 3 holes I could put the rear leg or the front leg of the A-arms up or down. Everything is tightly controlled, etc., etc. I'd say while that has helped some series throughout the world in North America to grow, the clicking that good old Amazon Prime button and the thing shows up and you go race it and you have fun, it has at the same time ensured that trades have dwindled. The art of metalworking, the blacksmithery involved, whether it is with metal or manipulating fiberglass or carbon and other composites, these are things that, and I'm not trying to say this is not a Pruett says everything was better back in the day. It's just honestly a little bit of mourning of things that we have lost or are losing. Back in the early 90s, all I wanted to do was to raise enough money to go to Reno, Nevada, to the Abaris Training Center, ABARIS. For all I know, they're still around. They had advertisements in the back of On Track magazine where you could go there, and it was a 7-day course or something, and you could learn composites, how to make things out of composites, how to repair composites, etc. And a couple years later, I went to work for a team, Genoa Racing, where one of our guys, Pierre Saint-Gelais, Genoa made the investment since Formula cars were becoming more and more carbon-based, sent Pierre to that class, and he came back, and it was like he was all of a sudden the most valuable guy, Graham, because he could do things the rest of us couldn't. And we were at some races, Indy Lights, for example, where one guy had an off in practice and broke part of the bottom of the Lola Indy Lights tub, and Pierre was really about the only guy in the paddock who could help fix it. So Pierre actually went and helped one of our rivals repair their carbon tub so they could go race. And I just mention this stuff because while carbon knowledge maybe isn't all that rare or as rare as it once was, it's not something where, a lot of folks have any knowledge of it or would need to, because they can just buy this thing off the shelf, send it back to a manufacturer to have it repaired and sent back. The actual building up of oneself or one's team to know extreme fabrication and making this and doing that. Yeah, we've gotten down to a place where you kind of don't need to know these standard items, things that were once standard, to play in the sport and to be excellent in it. There's not as much of a need for everyone. It's still needed within the big, full pro teams, don't get me wrong, but the average person now does have the ability to click that button, be in the game, kind of be competitive without having to know nearly as much. So I don't know if that's a good thing from an inclusivity standpoint, if that's even a word, from allowing more folks to come in without having to really go through that knowledge process, or if it's bad and that we are losing folks with extreme knowledge because those with less are now more common. So not totally sure on that end. Let me get back to Kevin's direct question here. I'm a massive fan of hill climb and time attack and drifting. Have helped a friend nearby, Mike Warfield, who owns GST Motorsports, who has about a frickin' 800 or 900 horsepower Subaru L that has been raced by IMSA racer, Scuderia Corsa driver Jeff Westphal. Actually connected Jeff with them probably 10 years ago maybe. But yeah, have tried to help out there with any input that I can. And on the drifting end, I can actually claim to have paid my own way to fly out to Las Vegas to watch drifting probably 10 or 11 years ago and found it to be fascinating. And the skills involved were just phenomenal. It's still a judged thing. It's like boxing. It's like MMA. Granted, in those you can knock someone out and the judges are rendered useless, but it's still a judged thing, which I think is one of the reasons hardcore racers have scoffed at it. But I'm a big fan of all three, Kev. I just wouldn't lump any of them into sports cars, which is why we don't really talk about them here. So...
Oddly enough, there is a parallel with a couple of questions. I was just going to group it together here as a bit of a challenge for both of us. One comes from Cookie Monster FL, and the other one comes from Jonathan Wesley. Hello. Cookie Monster says he's just bought his Sebring tickets. Can't believe how cheap they are for a doubleheader of this caliber. That's, of course, the WEC IMSA doubleheader we're going to get in March of next year. Asks us, gentlemen, the race we attended that we paid for that had the best bang for your buck, any era. Jonathan says, do either of you have had a favourite race meeting you've attended or worked as a spectator for work or as a spectator? Not necessarily a sports car event, but a weekend when all the stars aligned to give a truly memorable experience. He says his is the one-off visit by the ALMS to Silverstone in May 2000. Ooh. Chance to see American Championship race in the UK. Perfect weather. Race that finished in the dusk. He got to meet Dick Barber. So did I. Can I talk about that race first? Because actually, Jonathan, that was something that changed it for me. I have to say, I was back the following year and working as a bona fide race reporter. That was my last season with my son in attendance with me purely as a fan. And you're absolutely right, Jonathan. And here you go. Kudos to those good people at the American Le Mans series on the Dom Paynos at the time for producing that show. What was telling about that wasn't just how good it was on the Saturday, it was how it showed up what we got on the Sunday, which was the FIA GT race, which had, I think, from memory, one Lister Storm, a gaggle of factory and privateer entered Vipers, the Orica-built Viper GT1s, I think, as they were at the time. Mm-hmm. And it was okay, but compared to what we'd seen the previous day, there was an epiphany for me at that point. I'd already been bitten by the Le Mans bug, but that was the moment at which I thought, that's what I want to watch. That's what I want to be concentrating on. That's the thing that's now done it for me. It was that mixed class racing of extremely high quality. And some of the people that you met in that paddock, I remember having a fabulous encounter with my then reasonably young son and Doc Bundy in the paddock. And it wasn't just the really well-known guys. It was just that everybody had that aspect to the sports car racing paddock that I now recognise, which is everybody just seemed to be coming together to want to help everybody else to have a good time. And it was a fabulous, absolutely fabulous experience. Thank you for asking that one. So that's the answer to me for both those questions. I agree, by the way, massive bargains at some of these big sports car racing venues, whether or not it be WEC, IMSA, the European Le Mans Series, whatever. What about you, MP?
Two things come to mind. One I've spoken about a few times and cited when asked this, and I apologize I don't have a better replacement for it, but one that stands out just as a fan, and I think I was actually working that weekend, but in one of the support series, it was the 1990 IMSA GTP / just general IMSA visit to Sears Point, what we now know as Sonoma Raceway. And I think I was the team that I work for, our shop was based there. That's one that Jimmy Vasser came out of, by the way, and won his Formula Ford National Championship, which launched him to later prominence, but was there working as a mechanic, but also, as my former bosses will attest, when I was done working on the cars, or if there was something really cool happening in another series that I could sneak away to, I would do that. So I was a bad employee. And I can tell you that I will never forget qualifying for the 1990 GTP race at Sears Point, because this was possibly IMSA's finest year with GTP in terms of car count, vehicular variety, manufacturer not count, driver talent, etc. And this was a year where Jeff Brabham and his number 83 Nissan GTP car was dominant once again, but we also had the Jaguars with their new twin-turbo V6 models as well fighting back. We had Toyotas. Oh, I was working as well. No, it wasn't a sports series. It was actually... sorry, I'm brain farting. I was working for a GTP team in that race, but it was a really bad GTP team, so we didn't have much to pay attention to in qualifying on our end. But I did, it was watching and listening It was the true theater of radio, because we could only, from pit lane, we could only see the cars for a brief amount of time before, the way the Sears Point circuit is laid out. On pit lane, you see them zip in front of you, go away, you don't see them again, very briefly. No TV monitors and whatnot like we do today. So it was theater of the mind of listening to the announcers call each car going out. Back then, Graham, it was single car qualifying. How fun was that? Basically an out lap and I think 2 timed laps and in. So it was a fairly quick affair, and was expecting a Jeff Brabham pole or a Davy Jones in one of the Jags or something along those lines. And Brabham went just rocket fast, absolutely amazing. And then Perry McCarthy in the, quote, factory Spice Chevy. By factory, I should say, the factory is running it, but we're talking about a specialist British constructor going up against Nissan, Toyota, Jag, Porsche, you name it. And good old Pell, he did magic during his qualifying laps, and broke the all-time lap record at Sears Point on his way to earning pole position, knocking off all of the giant factories, including, a god among men in a car that was godlike in that Nissan GTP car. Just phenomenal. So yeah, now that I think of it, now that I remember it properly, although I was working there as an IMSA GTP mechanic, because we had no real role in going for pole, Graham, I think I just stood there and watched amazing drivers do amazing things. So that stands out. In terms of on the professional side, 2008 Petit Le Mans, Alan McNish, the drive of the gods as well, after crashing on the outlap and having all kinds of issues. His drive, and the team's drive with Audi as well, in the R10 TDI, but I will say specifically, good old Al, who was supposed to be having dinner with Sunday night, that fell through. We were supposed to have lunch this afternoon, but that's fallen through as well. Watching Alan's comeback to unlap themselves and chase down the leading Peugeot 908. I'm sure there were plenty of others who were tracking that from early in the event, early in the 10-hour-ish race, Graham, but I do remember cottoning on to that very early and just watching the slow rise and realizing that he and they were lapping at speeds that were just seemingly not possible by humans, lap after lap after lap, and catching and passing Christian Clean in the leading 908 with whatever it was within the last hour of the race. Just epic. Truly epic. And the bad part was I was there to work. All I really wanted to do was just watch and cheer like a fool. And, go Al! But I had to actually pay attention and try and write about it afterwards, which I probably did a horrible job because I was so distracted. Oh, there were other cars? Oh, well, that was kind to them. I really was only watching one.
Here's the strange thing about that R10. You're absolutely right. There was an unbelievable drive throughout. The R10, when it came out, didn't like the car. They appreciated the technology, absolutely got what a significant step forward that was. Didn't like the car, thought it looked heavy and cumbersome. But the more I look back at actually what was achieved with that program, the more not just the historic position of that program, but the significance and the achievement that team made with that car, the more that stands out as a major memory developing in my time in the sport. And, that was the standout performance, no doubt in my mind, with the R10 TDI. But there were so many of them where they were just doing something very different. It comes back, doesn't it, to that business about having a more open rule book. At that time, that was just a total game changer. It became the de facto technology you had to have before we got around to chucking around the hybrid technology a little bit later.
Absolutely. And let's go ahead and do a little bit of hashtag breaking exclusive scoop news. Granted, this is a one-sided news story, so take with whichever size grain of salt is necessary. This just landed, 3 minutes ago from our friends at Sebring Raceway with a headline of record ticket and parking sales at Sebring. And here's the first paragraph, followed by a sentence afterwards. That, provided it's all accurate, would be pretty darn awesome, Graham Goodwin. First day sales of tickets and parking for what is being dubbed the 2019 Super Sebring, doubleheader of the Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring, presented by Advance Auto Parts, and the WEC 1,000 Miles of Sebring, rose more than 314% over opening day sales for the 2018 event. And they also have written a large percentage of reserved trackside parking spaces and Sebring's premium ticket, the Club Sebring, were sold on day one. So again, provided there is nothing but accuracy and truth in this press release that has come out, a 314% increase in sales for the 2019 IMSA and WEC doubleheader at Sebring over this past May's IMSA-only event at Sebring. That would be pretty darn amazing. Again, it's first day sales. Will second day be up and third day? And, but at least in terms of indicators, Graham, because I think there's been a genuine question, will people give a fart with this doubleheader offering with the WEC being on site as well?
It looks like they will.
It sure look like people are jumping right onto it, and that makes me really happy. Why? Growth in sports cars, my friend. That's all we want to see. Like our little podcast, like support from wonderful advertisers, as I just found a vaguely natural segue into this little piece of awesome news from our friends at PNC Bank. PNC Bank is proud to sponsor the 2018 IndyCar Series champion, Scott Dixon, driver of the number 9 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. Congratulations, Scott. Copyright 2018, the PNC Financial Services Group, Incorporated. All rights reserved. PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC.
Well, we said the last couple of weeks that if we don't get to your questions, I can tell you right now we're not going to get to them all this week, but I will go back to one that was asked 2 weeks ago, then last week, and now again this week by Salam from the Reddit WC group, I think. It's asking about knows the World Motorsport Council exists, headed by the FIA. Do you think there can ever be a council, let's call it the World Sports Car Council, where all of the governing bodies, the FIA, CO, IMSA, SRO, JAF, etc., work together with manufacturers, privateers, track owners, promoters collectively to grow sports car racing? I think it's about growing the sport, but also about the way in which we constantly get back to this issue about clashes with major races. I hope not so very long after you get to hear this show, there will be some news. I know it's before the Endurance Commission with a couple of proposals for changes to the provisional calendar for the WEC in 2019 and into 2020, where we know there's been a number of potential clashes. This is just massively difficult. Year on year on year, there is more and more and more racing. And of course, with the primary products we have in World Sports Cars, with its IMSA, with its the FIWEC, etc., it's just extremely crowded. We have had too many clashes. There's no doubt about that. But that's not for the want of trying. It's an extraordinary thing when you get, more or less direct public accusation that it's even been done on purpose. Look, these are people sitting down, as MPs just said, to put together a race meeting that at the moment looks like it's seeing extraordinary growth in the number of people attending. And then we're supposed to believe that just a few months later, there's been some kind of Machiavellian plan to mess each other up on the calendar. Japan is a particular problem on calendars. There is this small period of time when most, if not all, of the international motorsports takes place. There's all sorts of reasons for that, some through tradition, some to do with logistics. In the case of the WEC, their plan came to grief with a change of F1 dates, and very often, because of course it's another FI World Championship, that tends to be a particular problem. I can recall, I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again, we had one occasion where I think I'm right, there were 14 changes to the Formula One calendar, and that I think was the first year of the FIWEC, and it gave all sorts of problems for calendar having to be issued and reissued. There will never be a perfect solution, but I hope what we're going to see in the emerging 24 to 48 hours after you hear this show is that there will be fewer clashes from the races coming for the next season of the FIWEC. I'm expecting that there's likely solutions in the very short term for a couple of those. I'm expecting that the potential clash that could happen with Bathurst 12 hours in the early part of 2020 might not, and that might be because the Bathurst team will actually take the opportunity to just move their race back a further week. But, this is, and I can be critical of it. I have been critical of it. It is a really tough thing to get right. It's particularly tough when your hands are kind of halfway tied behind your back with the logistics of actually kind of trying to get the best freight deals for your customers and those teams around the world clash with the other major events and the kind of the time frame you've been given. But fingers crossed, we are about to see a better solution for absolutely everybody emerge from that mire.
I know that we have some car topical accuracy providing that might be timely as well.
We do. I mean, this one MP story from, I'll name check him, why shouldn't I? Gary Watkins.
Good man.
Autosport.
Strange man,
very good
but
man.
Good man.
And, of course, we're all strange in the sports car press room. You should know that by now.
Things you hear on a regular basis.
He's very actually. Now you mention it, it's got that glint in his eyes. It could be just the glasses, but he's got that glint in his eyes. But Gary bringing news that an additional group in the room for the various technical groups discussing with increasing urgency the shape and form of the car 2020 hypercar LMP1 GTP. Please give us something we can actually call it moving forward. That BMW are now in the room for that, but also making it very clear, and I was surprised to see the bluntness of this, that the reports you will have read about Ferrari and Ford no longer being in the room are, I quote, erroneous, incorrect. Now, I knew that certainly part of it was erroneous because I witnessed the aftermath of that in the press room at Silverstone. But it just goes to show you've got to be very, very careful with pronouncing something dead. Does that mean that all of the manufacturers in that room will necessarily be coming forward with 2 or 3 shiny cars for the Le Mans 24 Hours 2021? Hell no, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. In some cases, they will be wanting to keep an eye on the way in which things are actually moving. They'll want to keep their options open. And if they can influence the technical shape of that to look and see whether or not there might be a factory or even a customer motorsport program coming year 2 or year 3, that could be part of that as well. It's sensible for some of those operations, the Ferraris of this world, the McLarens of this world, just to keep an eye on whether or not there's a component opportunity for them, whether or not it's to do with hybrid drive electronics, et cetera, wait and see what emerges from this. Do I know what's going to happen? I've got a reasonable idea, I think I said last week, of the percentage possibilities for a number of those manufacturers being involved. But please, please, please don't just jump on any clickbaity story that actually says this manufacturer has not been at that meeting last Tuesday, therefore they're definitely not going to be around in that marketplace. Because you know what? You might just be wrong. You might be right, and that they might not be there, but they most certainly are still involved in the conversations that are coming forward. And I hope we're going to hear more about those in the relatively near future. MP.
I'm going to grab one here from Daniel Tripp because he uses some incredible hashtags in here. MP and GG got one of those what ifs for you. If I were to win the lottery, lose my mind, and decide to do so, what would be involved, and how expensive would it be to get a car developed and homologated for GT3 and or GT4/GTS? Hashtag, me personally, the Alfa Romeo 4C is the choice. A car that is beautiful and deserved to be raced. I believe we're going to see that happen in World Challenge next year, Daniel, at least from what me personally have heard. And he also says, with BMW pencil whipping, great great word, the V8 into the Z4 a few years ago, I'd think getting the 2.9-liter twin-turbo V6 from the Alfa Giulia shouldn't be an issue for the 4C, at least for GT3. The standard 1.7-liter turbo would do fine for GT4, I'd think. And then hashtag, at the end of the day, Alfa Romeo would be a great addition to both categories. It's this or my insane plan to restart the Can-Am series. I'll give you heartburn some other day on that. Keep up the good work, guys. Daniel, first of all, Can-Am series reboot. I'm right behind you. Whatever you need, I'm there. The only issue, if we're sticking to the GT3, 4, or GTS angle, is motor swappage is really not de rigueur in that SRO Stefan Rattel construct. Plucking, how's this? That's more of a GTLM IMSA kind of thing, from my knowledge, unless I am forgetting something in GT3, Graham, where a manufacturer is allowed to take an entirely different power plant and drop it in.
Oh, you can. You can. The BMW, you're absolutely right, did it with the Z4 GT3. It's a car that never had a V8.
Oh, that's right. I apologize. I'm forgetting that was a GT3 as well. That's what was converted to GTLM. So see, you guys know how dumb I am. I'm so glad when I can unknowingly confirm this fact. So.
I am hearing, for instance, that forthcoming GT, me personally, right now, and uniquely so, and we'll carry on and all those other stuff that irritates everybody, that in the consideration of forthcoming GT3 cars, for instance, that because of the way in which balanced performance impacts those cars, and because of the way in which that balanced performance might impact a road car engine that is just too capable, if you like. We know that very many occasions the GTE or GT3 versions of a road car actually have rather less power than their road-going versions, just far more capable in terms of the electronics and the aerodynamics, for instance. But I am hearing of two different organisations that are considering fitting the basic motor from the car further down the range, because that is actually more useful in keeping the car within the performance envelope that they know they're going to get within the chosen regulations they're going for. So it's an interesting change, isn't it? Whereas, in the BMW's case, it was a more capable V8. In this case, and I'm not going to name the manufacturer, it actually means that they believe there might be an advantage in going for the smaller capacity, less powerful engine. There's one other point that came up from this, because the other point that was made there was around private individuals doing this. There is a record of fairly recently a private individual doing exactly this, and that is the Jaguar F-Type GT4. That from James Holder, who's one of the founders of the Superdry brand. And it was James that actually paid for the design and homologation of the Jaguar F-Type GT4 with the effort that's been doing the rounds in the British GT Championship this year with injured servicemen in the Invictus racing program. And that is now a product that is being marketed by Jaguar themselves, by their Special Vehicles Operations Unit. So, there is the opportunity to do that. That car, by the way, was designed by Graham Humphreys, who, amongst other things, did the original Bentley GT3, and I think did some GTP and Group C stuff back in the day, didn't he?
Sounds very familiar. Very familiar.
But there you go. So the answer there is that if you've got that kind of eye-watering amount of money, you can do exactly that. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. You do need the permission of the manufacturer, but you are allowed to develop a GT3 or a GT4 car as a tuner, as indeed Callaway have done with the Corvette GT3. So there's an extended answer to what wasn't quite the question. Another quick question a bit further down there, and I'm again struggling through this long list of questions,
and
to do with Motorsport TV.
Question too. He also helped correct an incorrect answer to the question. So me personally appreciate it. Motorsport
TV.
Now we/you should clarify that there's a variety of things that use motorsport in its title. There's Motorsport
Yep.
News, there's Motorsport Magazine, there's motorsport.com.
Yep.
Before we get into this fine piece of journalism on dailysportscar.com, we would be smart monkeys to tell folks that they're not all one and the same thing, owned by the same people.
They're not. So Motorsport Magazine, absolutely completely different kettle of fish. And, a long-standing monthly magazine. In fact, it was the last monthly magazine I actually subscribed to. But they are not part of the Motorsport Network. Motorsport Network, highly acquisitional empire with a whole range of products online, in magazines, and indeed with their own TV channel.
I believe
amongst other things.
They own Formula One, they own NASCAR. I believe they own Earth as well.
In the International Space Station, which
Yes.
is now being painted yellow with black writing on the side that now says Motorsport Network. But they didn't announce that they were going to be closing Motorsport TV, until at least two media outlets, one in Formula One, one mine, challenged them to do so, because we had been hearing from friends and colleagues in the industry that a lot of letters were going out to say that their TV channel, previously Motors TV, based in Paris, broadcasting across Europe with a range of live and tape delay products, ranging from just club events up to World Championship stages, including the FIWEC, that they were told that what is termed linear broadcasting. Linear broadcasting is effectively anything you do through a broadcast channel that is not just streamed online. That they are going to be closing their TV channel at the end of this month, so that was with 2 weeks' notice, and that means getting rid of all their freelance production, editing, and presenting staff. And also, I believe, not confirmed the numbers yet, because there was a reasonably typical corporate response to a number of questions, very polite, but reasonably typically, how can we put this, incomplete statement that didn't confirm numbers. But I believe what will be happening with Motorsport TV, they tell us they are shifting in response to customer demand to a purely online platform. What it actually means is we're closing our TV station because it was hemorrhaging money, and we're laying off a lot of people, including, I believe, the people that produce their own programming for them, to things like discussion programming, studio-based documentary, and news discussion is done. I think they are in some trouble with their broadcast product. They never produced an HD product, despite having promised that they would do so. And indeed, the other bits and pieces that were not revealed or confirmed were a reshuffle in their senior management structure that we believe is going to see the CEO, Colin Smith, ex of NASCAR, leaving the organization. James Allen, yes, that one, stepping up as president of the organization, and at least one, and I believe now more, senior members of staff either already having left or about to confirm that they are. And the expectation amongst many people, amongst the industry watchers and people internal to Motorsport Network, that at least one and possibly more of their published products, their magazine products, may well be withdrawn from the marketplace in the months to come. So let's wait and see what comes out from Motorsport Network. They're extremely good at telling us what they've bought, not quite so good at telling us what's closing down and why. And let's see whether or not what had been a rapidly growing network of assets continues to do so. There are a lot of very fine people working within that organisation. At the moment, it has to be said the direction is not clear as to what's going on moving forward. Enough said from me.
And we've heard allegations of lawsuits. I cannot claim with any accuracy that motorsport as a product in recent years has been held as one of the more popular entities in our hemisphere. The company, the business, to me, though, very different than the people. The majority of the people, like ourselves, those who are in the proverbial trenches, even in offices, doing good work, making content, making videos, making stories and photos. There are a lot of very good people, and I have a number of folks who I would term as close friends, if not dear friends, who are within their employment. And while, again, I have not heard a lot of people express great affinity for the parent company, I can say that I do not like to hear that anybody within our world of motor racing is being laid off, losing their job, etc., because of contraction and things having to be downsized, rumors or suggestions of financial issues leading to such things, etc. Yeah, you don't celebrate these kinds of things. I mean, motorsport is a rival to every other outlet, just like every other outlet is a rival to them as well. But this, to me, I take such things from a team mindset. It's hearing that team such and such is shutting down, or they're having to go from a 4-car entry to 1 or 2, whatever it might be. And even though in theory it makes the competition, at least trying to get a win or a podium, a little bit easier, it's still not something that makes me happy. I know that some probably will celebrate or would celebrate, but that's not how it lands for me, at least. And I'm not trying to be an old softy or otherwise, but that's just a little bit of reality. We want to hear our sport, especially on the media side. And we have a good media-ish question towards the very top we might I'll come to in just a sec, but we mentioned from time to time, we try not to make the backside of the sport, the reporting and coverage and broadcast, too big of a part of what we talk about, but it's shrinking. I'd be lying. I'd be really lying if I said I had complete confidence that I will retire, if I ever retire, but I will retire still holding the same job title or being in the same profession, because I have serious concerns as to whether there will be enough outlets left for folks like you and I to have jobs. Or, I mean, of course, you own your business. I own myself, and could put all my efforts into a MarshallPruett.com reporting whatever and go and seek advertisers and backers as some others have done. But yeah, there's a legitimate concern that with so few outlets left, so many print outlets having shut down or gone the way of digital, and even digital dwindling in some areas. When I hear a motorsport network or whatever else is looking to downsize in any area, it definitely lends a little bit of concern for me. So let me transition from there, Graham, into a question that came in from Reddit via M.W. Clarkson. He said, with the volume of continental and intercontinental travel requirements, long working hours, and weekly transatlantic Skype recordings, how hard is it to maintain a meaningful family/personal life alongside a career in motorsports journalism? And I would say that following Matt's, along with Matt's question here, saying if that's a little bit too close, could you share insights maybe from the team side, mechanics, engineers, and such? They're fairly similar. Folks turning up at the racetrack to offload a car and roll it into a garage, tend to arrive at similar times as, those on the reporting and broadcast side. And I know that many nights we, on our side of the fence, tend to be the ones going home later than everyone else. But why don't you share with us some thoughts here, Graham, on how, if and how, you're able to maintain some sort of work-life balance while being a motorsporty journalist?
Okay. Number one, I'm very lucky. I've got an absolutely awesome wife. Trudy is an astonishing supporter here. Many of you will know that I had a previous career, 30 years working in central London, working with and having large groups of kind of PR and communications people working, for me. But I did make the choice for a variety of reasons to step away from that and do this full time. I'd done it for a long time in the background. And I did that for family reasons. I did that because at the time, my daughter needed more time with mum and dad. I'll go no further than that. That needed more time with mum and dad, and actually having a commute that you could number in dozens of steps from the back door of the house to the office at the bottom of the garden made a heck of a lot more sense, even if I was still doing all of that travel that I clearly do. It meant more time with my young daughter. Family is incredibly important to me. I come from a very large family. I have 5 sisters. I have a single brother, another journalist, in possibly the only thing more stretched at the moment than motorsport journalism, which is actual national newspaper journalism in the UK. He works for the Guardian newspaper. And you need awesome people around you who understand and embrace to a degree the ups and the downs of doing what we do. What are the ups of doing what I do? I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I don't come home and moan about the job as much as I used to previously. I do come home utterly exhausted at times, and I'm sure you do as well, MP. It is a massive privilege. I do adore my job more than words can say, but don't for a second think that this isn't enormously hard work. You know, there's 1 or 2 people maybe listening tonight that I know have kind of crossed the threshold of Daily Sports Car and other enterprises I've been involved with to see whether or not actually this was something they'd like to do. You find out pretty quick that this is not a cakewalk. It is, something that does require commitment. It does require a skill set, and it absolutely requires stamina. And that gets more difficult as the years tend to kind of pile on, says grey-haired old devil, sitting here in southeast England. But yeah, it is a great job. No, I will never take it. As I keep telling the guys who work with and for me, Stephen Kilby, I'm sure, will be listening to this one, and he'll be very familiar with my phrase. After a really trying night at 1 o'clock in the morning, when yet another race-winning car's been excluded, and with their punching tables and quietly swearing at scrutineers, I will have a phrase I will always use, which is "could be worse, could be working down a coal mine." But you do need the people around you that do understand the pressures that come with this one. 9 to 5, it most certainly is not, he says, at 28 minutes past 10 in the evening. The reality here is this does require commitment and a lot of hours. And I can tell you right here and now, and I'll say it now for the record, I love my family more than words can possibly say. I have the most astonishing lady that stands in my corner, and without her support, I could not have done what I did to determine to do this as a full-time job and continue to take it forward. And by the way, as MP will know, there's going to be some more news on that, I hope, in the coming days and weeks. Some exciting stuff to come.
You're getting married to another family? Wow! Congratulations! All right. Polygamy. I didn't know that was legal in the UK, but
I will say this much, because there's a question that touches on it a little bit later. Remarkably, I have ended up, for reasons that will be obvious to some people that know my family background, with 2 children called Jesse and James. I don't know how I did that. They are a pair of outlaws. But that is the remarkable story of where I am in life. Bless them.
Well, I'm glad you didn't name them Abbott and Costello, because that would have been even worse. I don't have a lot more to add that you haven't already mentioned, Graham. I will throw in that the time investment required to do this job properly is serious. It is not laboring, it is not labor intensive. I made up another word. You can tell I'm getting tired.
Right word.
It is not labor intensive from a physical standpoint, although there are some photographers who are, outside in the elements, carrying around all their various gear, from morning till night, and I know that can wear out knees and backs and otherwise, but it is something where it can be mentally exhausting. It is often mentally exhausting. So no crocodile tears there, compared to those who do have to make a living or choose to make a living doing things that are very labor intensive and use your strength and stamina to do those jobs. We live the most fortunate of lives doing what we do on this end. Doesn't change the fact though, Graham, that your mind is always working, and as it took me a while to learn this fact, but this is an artistic profession, and it can certainly be boiled down to a non-artistic black and white thing. You and I occasionally poke fun at a certain site in the sports car world that seems to be devoid of color, but art is an artistic mindset. How can I tell a story? What's the best way? What are the tools? What are the visuals? Just thinking. Creativity is something that I think for many, once you turn that on, it is hard to turn it off. I can say that this morning I had to get up and use the boys' room at about 3 a.m. Went to bed knowing that I'd be waking up this morning writing a little opinion piece on Scott Dixon's 5th IndyCar title. And while the getting up and going to the boys' room and coming back to bed maybe took 90 seconds, 2 minutes total, I was not particularly awake when I woke up. I mean, I was still, mostly asleep when I stumbled there and back, climbed in bed, and caught myself after about 5 minutes writing sentences in my head of the story that I ended up writing. And that, just the mind's going. And I
recognize that.
Having
absolutely
to
right.
Catch myself and say, "Hey, idiot, go to sleep," right? Because just that little spigot had been turned on and it was flowing. So that's definitely one thing, and you have to be in that creative space because there's so many incredible folks in this sport, either with a keyboard or a camera or whatever, that are brutally creative and artistic, that if you don't want to get lost, if you just want to be a kind of black and white, fact-based, factoid-based thing, but no opinion, no voice, no whatever else, no color, that tends to be where you live. So that can certainly intrude on one's personal life. So I'll just, close my little contribution here in saying that if there's one thing I think I've gotten better at over the years, it is, even if it wakes me up, me personally, while I'm sleeping, or I can't get back to bed because of that, it's trying to be, if not being, very intent on pushing that aside and not letting that desire to create and write 15 stories a day and interview 1,000 people, making sure that has a place of its own, so that you can be fully present and fully engaged in your husband, your wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever, because I at least have learned from what it was like to be too consumed by that creative bend, and that was not positive. So at least learning that for me, Graham, and recognize that, okay, I must compartmentalize, must turn that off, and go take out the garbage or whatever menial things, that those have to be equally as important.
Absolutely. Oddly enough, there's a neat segue into a question here from Never Heard of Her, Shay and
Nope.
Adam.
No clue. Fake person.
No. Okay. Both of you gents are cat people. This has come up before. A new
Poop
kitten
and
appears
cats.
on your doorstep. What racing name are you? Yeah, absolutely. But what racing names are you likely to adorn your new life partner with? Well, oddly enough, there is a parallel here with Trudy, and it came with a cat that we had a while ago. He's no longer with us, God bless him. But it was Trudy's first ever pet. Trudy had never had pets before she met me. She arrived in my life when I had my beloved little cat Yoda that's now gone. But we got Digby. Digby was a big black tomcat, but Digby was the name he arrived with, and my son James and I decided mischievously that we wanted to give him another name, and that name, actually, it was based on a bright orange Pontiac dragster.
Huh.
The Judge.
Wow.
Okay, but that wasn't the point. It wasn't just the Judge. his name wasn't the Judge. His name was the Judge. It had to be said like that. So that what we started to do, we did this, I'm afraid, as an absolute wind-up for Trudy until she called time in an extremely abrupt fashion. Is what we would call him in at night from the kitchen door by shouting, "The Judge! The Judge!" Like that. It lasted about a week before we got verbally battered, I'm afraid. So that is my motorsport cat story.
That is so brilliant.
Dario!
Yeah, oh my goodness. I would say, I might have mentioned this before, it feels like it was a long time ago though, that I grew up wanting a dog very badly somewhere in the mid-1980s while I was in high school. And I think I wanted the dog more so I could name it Cosworth than I actually wanted to have a dog. I think I wanted to have a dog named Cosworth more than the responsibility of owning a dog. And then I will admit to being crestfallen when the great, and I believe championship-winning Trans Am driver Wally Dallenbach Jr. had started to get into IndyCar racing, and on some IndyCar broadcast in, I'm guessing, the late 80s, featured him on his farm, something like that, walking around with his wife, and his dog was running along, and during this little vignette, he yelled to the dog, "Cosworth! Come here, Cosworth!" or something like that. And I just was heartbroken. I thought I was the only person in the world who wanted to get a dog and name it Cosworth, because I thought that was just the best name, because I was in love with Cosworth's engines. And then Wally Dallenbach Jr., if you're listening, my friend, you done broke my heart because you beat me to it. So
Keith. Call it Keith.
Well, Keith Costin. That's what I could call it. Anyways, so, and I've never had a dog, so I guess I'm truly laying all the blame on Wally's feet for no particular reason, and there's nothing to do with it. But yeah, so maybe, no, I don't think my wife would let me name our next cat Cosworth. We've been on this Well, we got
remarkably, I've just spotted it. I've remarkably just spotted another question. Completely. Enrique Brand. Hi, Marston Gray. My wife and I expecting our second child. Congratulations. Somehow managed to convince her to name our first son after one of my favourite racing drivers. Oh, my God, what's it going to be? His name is Liam Oliver, named after Oliver Gavin. For our second soon-to-be born, I convinced her to name him after one of my favourite racing drivers. His name will be Lucas Dario. Wow. My question is, what racing driver? Yeah, that is cool. You're going to tell Dario that
so
one.
Much better than Taki Inoue. That, yeah. Wow.
Question is, what racing driver names would you give your children if you could convince your respective wives? I tried to Marino for my first son, but my wife vetoed it. Sorry, Marino.
Aww.
Well, I guess I should admit that the middle name of my son James is James Emerson Ronnie Peterson Goodwin. No, it isn't. No, it's not. It's Andrew. But Ronnie's great. I mean, Ronnie was my first hero. Ronnie would be the one for me.
I was going to say Bushu, just because that would be the most obscene. The kid would be the most hated one ever in every sporting endeavor, at least. But yeah, that would be a bad idea.
This is my permitted mention of Christopher Bucket at this point.
Yeah, so it's funny you should mention this. I've actually thought about this a little bit, and I don't mean to turn things sad at all, but if we were fortunate to have a son, if anything other than Marshall Jefferson Pruett III is chosen, since I'm the second. If I'm thinking middle names or something like that, I had thought, I don't know if Justin would be it, but my late dear friend Justin Wilson's middle name, Boyd, came to mind as something that I might pick just out of love and honor for him. So, bless your heart.
Bless your heart. That's a brilliant reason for doing it as well. We're not a million miles away. Is it the actual 20 minutes, or is it
No,
your
we're
20
20
minutes?
minutes away. Well, actually, in the Marshall Pruett scale of 20 minutes being an hour, we might have about 5 minutes left, which is 20?
Right.
Right.
I'm going to go for it's another combined question. It came from, you remember our question earlier from Bonnie Last 47, who says that in her journey into motorsports, been reading the Formula One Reddit. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's very quiet on Reddit. Many participants seem to feel that young drivers who are not for a race day next year are all but dead. Is there some significant barrier that prevents drivers from driving in Formula One and sports car racing? Seems odd. There are several highly successful Formula One drivers who are having quite successful career transitions. That's followed up by the fabulously named Fallacious Argument, who talks, amongst other things, about people like Marciello, who is a Blancpain champion, having been a GP2 and F2 contender. There's all sorts of other examples in IndyCar, in sports cars, etc. It is strange. I know it's something that winds a lot of people up when people talk about retirement for various people, the ludicrous nonsense that we see on a number of mainstream UK websites, newspapers, where there seems to be almost a willful ignorance of the fact that Fernando Alonso may well be stepping away from his Formula One career, but he's actually still a factory driver for a World Championship team elsewhere. And I've yet to see in barely any of the coverage that came from Fernando saying he was stepping down from F1 to say he's actually driving for Toyota, other than to say he won Le Mans. It is just silly, actually. And not only is it silly, it's quite insulting. The reality is that there is one thing that defines a number of the people that are referred to in this thread and others, which is for the first time in their career, they're being paid to race, because that certainly wasn't the case for very many of these extremely able young and not so young men when they were driving in Formula One. There are remarkably few people who are paid at that level to drive race cars, and what we have seen for a number of these guys, MP, is just how good they are when they're not driving a back-of-the-grid F1 car.
Completely. And we do get that same kind of, hey, Stoffel Van Dorn, he's a free agent. That means he's going to IndyCar and or the WEC, doesn't it? Not necessarily. And again, we can name, some other potential drivers too who are either in F1 that might be out, or some that were recently in and have transitioned to sports cars. If we're talking professional being something where money is given to you to perform your trade, after Formula One, you've got NASCAR, IndyCar, and the WEC as real places where you can earn proper money. And NASCAR, I would say, is certainly top of that next step list, other than a factory drive for Toyota. And since there's only one factory in prototype racing in the WEC, again, very few opportunities there to get in on the good stuff. But I mean, we're certainly not lacking talent, but there's maybe a part of me, Graham, I don't know if you agree, where I also feel a little bit sad for some of these guys, because we don't know how good a Van Dorn could be, for example, or Felipe Nasr, someone who could very well be our next IMSA prototype champion with Action Express. He did well in F1. His Sauber team was more capable of giving him a good car at the outset than they were towards the end of his brief tenure with them. But, I do get a bit sad, and I even tell the guys, I love you. I love having you here. I'm also sad you're here, because you should be driving something faster and scarier, because that's the kind of talent you have. That's what I think of. So, yeah, the crossover, the interest, you never know who's interested in what. We could assume that most F1 drivers are not keen on NASCAR, since it's more or less all oval-based, except for the one or two road course exceptions. We can assume sports cars would not be a first choice. They'd rather stay in F1, but at least it's a more natural transition. IndyCar has been a very hit or miss. Some say those ovals are crazy. You can get hurt. You're going way faster than any other car on an oval on the planet. No way. And then you get some others who say, yeah, sure, let me in. Give me a shot. I mean, what did Rubens Barrichello do the year after his F1 career came to a close? Came and did IndyCar. We had Alexander Rossi come over. He's now one of the top 2 drivers in the series, having never seen an oval beforehand, despite being an American. We've had a lot of GP2-ish Formula 3000 talent come over as well. Some have had better records than others. So, interesting though, and at least on the sports car side, Graham, I know, there are even some I was speaking with at Monterey who really are wanting to get some more phone numbers of people in IndyCar because they too feel like, yeah, that looks like it might be a little more fun.
I think the answer here is, and we can all be guilty of it. I'm certainly guilty of it. We can all be a little bit more embracing of what talent means, and a little bit more supportive of the fact that this is a bigger family than our own bubbles. And I'd certainly like to see that from the Formula One press corps, where frankly there's just blind ignorance often shown in terms of the way in which the rest of motorsport is reported. I happily will put my hand up and say, yeah, I stand in the corner for my part of the sport because there's not enough people doing it. And I think they can afford to take a couple of punches on that front. But yes, I think it is a very good point indeed to make. And I think we could all do with being a little bit more generous about talking about what success is in a career. Success in a career, as far as I'm concerned, is about the achievements you make and frankly about the money you can earn. If someone is going to tell me that someone's had 3 or 4 years tugging around, with the best result of 12th in a Grand Prix is a better career than Oliver Gavin has had driving for a squillion years as a factory Corvette driver and others beyond, having failed to get his super license in spurious circumstances, and I'm here to tell you they're wrong. Oddly, there's another segue. This one I think is absolutely for you. It's another fine named Redditor, Darth Fracas. What a great name that is. With almost the full year gone, how would you guys rate the driver moves that Penske Acura caused, beyond just how Ricky Taylor and Helio and Cameron and Montoya have worked out? How would you rate Nazar and Curran at Action Express and Jordan Taylor and Van der Zande at WTR? Did WTR have such a drop in form due to that 3 podiums versus 5 straight wins last year, MP?
Yes. And I look forward to getting the angry call from Wayne Taylor asking me if I'm a complete idiot for saying that. First of all, Darth Fracas, I believe that is the event where they go in the desert in the big trucks? Or is that Dakar?
Was that right?
Dakar, I apologize. Great question. Let's see. Let's start with WTR. Let's start with the closing one, WTR. Mentioned this at the outset of the season, and it has proven to be correct. Ricky Taylor was the key to their success, not minimizing Jordan Taylor's contribution as the other half of that championship-winning team, but Jordan readily admitted, well before his brother was signed to drive by Roger Penske, that Jordan's role in the team, traditionally as the closing driver, was to get in and drive the car that Ricky developed. Whatever it is, I'll get in, make the most out of it, and boy, is that kid great at making the heck out of whatever type of setup or balance that Ricky developed. Past tense, unfortunately. What he was not an expert in, readily admitting, was the development side, making that car a pole winner, making that car capable of running up front in the race. If it was made good, he would perform magic with it. Couldn't help you get it to that state of magic. That was Ricky's job. Well, you unplug Ricky, who was really the person making excellent vehicles for them to then use, throw him in over at Team Penske. Who has been the standout driver at Team Penske this year, even with men who own 5 Indy 500 winning rings and 2 IndyCar championships and you name it, it's been Ricky Taylor. Ricky Taylor, I don't want to say breakout because the guy went to the team as a champion, but there were certainly question marks in where would he slot in on the depth chart. Helio Castroneves, one of the great drivers ever. Juan Montoya, even greater. Ricky has been the deliverer of awesomeness on the most consistent basis within that program. And I would say Dane Cameron has also been incredibly good. I would say the two sports car veterans have eclipsed call them international superstars who've played in other series. But Ricky in particular, I think, will end the year in a place with that team where, at least internally, folks are thinking, thank goodness we got that kid, because he has been the rock for us the same way he was for WTR. So knowing that Jordan is not a chassis setup guy, the hope was that good old Renger van de Zande would be a like-for-like replacement, and that hasn't been the case. He is a very hard charger. He is an excellent race car driver as well. I would say he has been good in the technical development side, but the numbers don't lie. There has been an Action Express team with their drivers with identical Cadillacs that have been far more competitive from start to finish than the WTR team. The only change at WTR, unplugging of Ricky and plugging in Renger. So do I think that would be better in a year 2 of a Jordan and Renger partnership? Yes, but they are going to have to think long and hard about filling in the technical gap that the Action Express team has certainly exploited as a weakness. On the AXR side with Felipe Nasr and Eric Curran, who, unfortunately for me, is stepping back to a part-time role next year. Curran, I think, has been one of the greater success stories in IMSA, Graham, considering he came in a true Pro-Am guy, even back to when he moved up from GTs to Daytona prototypes in the Grand Am series.
100% agree.
He was a guy who had to be covered and protected. Whatever the minimum drive time was to score points for both drivers, that's who Eric was at the outset. His teammate back then, when they won the DP championship with AXR, was Dane Cameron. And it was Dane working his usual brilliance behind the wheel. What we've since seen in the development of Eric with the help of Dane and, with his Action Express teammates is, look, am I going to put Eric up against a Ricky Taylor to go back to the well there? Probably not. If we're talking, last 5 minutes of the race, wheel to wheel or matching lap times, I would not expect Eric to win in that specific dynamic. Darn near anybody else or anything other than the truly world-class elite, he's a guy who has humbled a lot of people. And you're sitting there looking at, the lap times at whatever race going, hey, man, that's Eric Curran pulling out whatever lead on you guy with a very big name and a very big successful team, or drawing down the gap. So I just love the fact that a guy who I got to know 12 years ago when he was driving little crap box Chevy, I don't even know what they were. They would have been Conti ST class models. And again, I apologize for forgetting, but little front wheel drive. Yeah, Cobalts. He was driving frickin' front wheel drive 4-cylinder Chevy Cobalts and ST, and then moved up to World Challenge GT and such. But a guy who, came in late career-wise and was in some fairly unimpressive things in his early days. Talk about a career arc of someone who has become almost as good as the top of the heap professionals in prototype racing in IMSA, and that is pretty darn amazing. Felipe Nasr, not a surprise that guy has just been a monster. As I mentioned, he belongs in it. He belongs in F1, but if not F1, IndyCar. I know that when we spoke at Monterey, Bobby Rahal expressed interest in testing him in one of his Indy cars. Felipe confirmed that they have spoken, and I'm hoping more conversations happen. He also asked me to share the contact info of another team owner, which I will, and he's returning to Action Express, so he's not going away, but I think enterprising IndyCar teams would realize that you have true F1 grade talent that can make your open wheel operation better, and sleeping on him would be downright silly. And then, I guess beyond that, the only disappointment I would say, and it's mild disappointment, is I thought of the two Penske lineups, I really thought Cameron and Montoya were going to be the ones generating the most fireworks. And whereas Ricky and Elio appear to have bonded like you wouldn't believe inside the car, really coming up with cars, Graham, that the two of them can just drive the wheels off of. They won, obviously, at Mid-Ohio. Dane Cameron's as fast as they come and as technically adept as they come. Montoya, among the fastest humans on the planet, and can drive anything, just at least from the outside. I'm not sure if they've clicked as well as we had hoped as a driver combo. Personally, they get along like just fireworks. They love each other. They have truly become very close. I wonder if they're not as far along as Ricky and Elio, though, in making the best car to go and race. So definitely something else for me to dig further into the off season here.
I've got a couple of quick ones I'll just rattle through. One is a question, very similar questions from two different people, Markle Fan 001 and Joseph Otrosky, both asking about the forthcoming British GT championship finale this weekend at Donington Park. What I think, the prospects there. Well, big points lead now with a reverse decision on a penalty for Johnny Adam and Flick Haig. They look like they're going in. I think it's sixth or better will get them the title. If that happens, it would, of course, be another historic win for a female driver in a major championship, joining Christina Nielsen, and by the look of things, Catherine Legg doing well there as well. So on that front, and of course on the front that this will be more or less the final race in a national championship for the current V12 Vantage GT3 as the de facto factory offering before the new car debuts. We've just had as well, by the way, TF Sports announcing one car. There might be a second car from a different team in the Asian Le Mans series as well. I'll say this much. For that reason, I hope they win it. It's been a stellar season in the British Championship, with Aston Martin really bringing out the stars to support their customer teams through the year. That's lifted things. We're going to have two previous champions, Rick Parfitt Jr. and Derek Johnston. Derek will be known possibly to US fans as the first ever winner of the Sunoco Daytona Challenge back in 2010, raced for Doran Racing at Rolex 24. Rick Parfitt Jr., by the way, also won one of the Sunoco Challenges, but raced in the Continental Challenge last year, I want to say. But both those gentlemen saying they're going to step back. So I hope we have a good, safe race without some of the regular shenanigans that tends to take place in season finales. The only other one, while you're having a look for one to wrap us up with, MP, is a couple of questions surrounding hydrogen power. We've got, is it Sol Liemis? And I'm just looking down. It was Donald Ducky Howe asking various questions about hybrid hydrogen drive in the LMP1 class in the future, whether or not Donald Ducky Howe asking whether or not that's one of the reasons why BMW are in the technical group. Absolutely, I think it's the reason why they're there. They want to have a look at the direction that the technology is actually going, because I think they're more interested in the next round of rules, some 3 to 4 years following that. We are, however, by the look of things, going to hear something pretty quickly from what's termed H24 in some pre-publicity. Look closely. That is Green GT. You might remember this car, MP. It came out first thing as a Garage 56 potential entrant, looking like a wacky racer. Then came later, based on, from memory, a WR chassis, looking like a far more attractive thing, more like a hypercar type thing. So what exactly we're going to hear, we wait with bated breath. But hydrogen is coming. Will that be a replacement for what we've currently got? Will that mean a whole different ball game in terms of equivalence to technology? Well, that's going to be one I think that we'll be able to debate in the weeks to come once we've seen what the fine folks at Green GT finally take the wraps off. It's a car that has run. There are other hydrogen-fueled efforts out there. Dutch student organisation running and racing with a hydrogen-fueled LMP3 car based on a DES chassis that they've taken out 2 or 3 times racing now. So it is a technology that is beginning to show signs of some maturity. Whether or not it's ready for top-line racing yet, I think we're going to find out pretty quickly. But yes, things are coming with hydrogen drive. What have you found to wrap us up, MP?
I'm looking here. This comes back to something somewhat early in the show, and if I'm forgetting that you actually read it, then smack me in the head from through the old pipeline here via Skype. David Barker says, I have a business trip to Tampa, Florida that I'm trying to schedule. Should I have it coincide with the Rolex 24 in January or the 12 hours of Sebring in March? He said, I attended my first IMSA race last month at Road America and am desperate to go to another. Well, David, I can tell you that based on the news we just read, you better get in and buy your tickets pretty quickly if you want to go to Sebring. They're so vastly different in terms of, I don't want to just say enjoyment, but they're just massively different things. And I would say if I'm traveling and loved Road America, loved the smell of bratwursts and food in the air and the kind of fun, everybody is there together enjoying environment, Sebring is the clear winner. Daytona is not even in the conversation. Now, there are still some fun infield camping and such at the Rolex 24. It's just a very different animal from a viewing standpoint. You're either up in the grandstands, which are immense and scary and huge, that look down on everything. You can see everything, but you're also fairly removed. You can then go to the infield and walk up close to some of the corners, but most of the lap is spent on the banking. And that's what it is. Sebring, on the other hand, it is a genuine, massive party. We do know that we're going to have both IMSA and the WEC there, so it's huge bang for your buck. But it's something where you can get to almost every corner. Most corners are fun and or interesting. If you like taking photos, Sebring is certainly a place where you can go home, I think, with a lot better photos from fan areas, fan locations, than you can Daytona. It's just a blast. The Rolex 24 is incredibly cool, though, and there will be drivers there, most likely some big names, as we often see, that you won't see elsewhere. So if you're, really big on certain big names and want to hopefully get their autograph and autograph session, go to Daytona. The rest of the viewing aspect as a fan, it's good. It's really good. It's just not Sebring good. If you want to go and if you want to wear yourself out, go to Sebring. You will be drunk off of the experience because it's so cool. There's so many great vantage points. The place is just loaded with people who've come for a party. It's all kinds of awesome. There's one downside that you won't really find at the Rolex 24, though, and that is even the hotels that still have crime scene tape up and have yet to mop up blood from the shooting in the parking lot charge $8 trillion per day. So the accommodations in Sebring some are okay, most are very questionable. Whatever you're going to get,
all will be gone.
Yeah,
all will be gone.
If you can find something, it's probably going to be hideously expensive or a bit of a drive. So whereas a Rolex 24, you can stay in a variety of places right on the beach, 15 minutes away from the track for not too much money. There's a lot more creature comforts there. Sebring's the exact opposite. So if I had to paint what I would do if I were you scenario, first of all, you're going on a business trip. I understand that. If you can have a couple of friends fly in as well, do that. rent a motorhome, motor coach, whatever it is, go to the Walmart, go to the Target, stock it up with all the food and drink you might want, get in now, I guess, because again, it looks like spaces are getting bought up pretty quickly, but buy some sort of camping, parking, whatever space so you can have that. And my suggestion would be to do that, become one of the Sebring tribe, have all the food you want there, barbecue, snack, drink, have a blast. Do not spend thousands of dollars on accommodations, and drop that sucker off at the RV rental place and fly home and say, you know what, that was the best. I did it on my own terms. I met a lot of cool people. I hung out, and man, I'm going to keep doing this every year from now on. There are some people that do that at Daytona, and that's awesome that they enjoy it. There are far more people that do that at Sebring, and I think it becomes almost an annual, we're not going to the Bahamas for vacation. We're going to Sebring and losing our mind. I think it can become that kind of event for you, David, since you are a little bit new to this world of endurance racing that Graham and I love.
I agree with absolutely every single word of it. I'll just say this, by the way.
And you're back to sounding like an alien, so you might unplug and replug.
Let me do that now. 1 second.
Yeah, do it now.
1 second.
Sounds like you're in the bathroom.
And am I back?
And you're back. I might not even edit that out. We'll just leave it in. Let folks hear how things really go down. But yeah, you're all good.
So I'd entirely agree. They're both great events. There's a good friend of mine, Mark Houghton, that the Rolex 24 Hours at Daytona is his favourite race of the year. I've never quite understood that, but it is awesome. It's awesome in a very different way. I'd say this much. Find out for yourself. Before you get drawn in, and you will, by the crack cocaine that is the Sebring 12 Hours, go and try it. Try that first. Next year, don't be drawn back by it. Show you can go to cold turkey and don't go to Sebring. Go to Daytona, and you will find out which you prefer. Try before you get into that rhythm where you go to the same race every single year. If you've got the opportunity to travel, trust me, you won't regret it. Go and find out how good these places are. And if you do like those two races, go and watch Petit Le Mans at Road Atlanta, one of the finest spectating circuits on the planet. Fabulous, fabulous events, great atmosphere there. And Road Atlanta, for me, worldwide of the circuits. And someone, by the way, asked me last week how many circuits. I did add it up. It's in the 50s somewhere. But of those circuits, that's one of the ones where, as a classic road racing circuit, you get just a stunning view from a number of different places. So they're the three, plus Laguna Seca, of course. Road America, I can't say, but you probably can, MP. But, you are blessed with some just fabulous spectating venues in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. Get to know them, because you won't regret it. It will be a life-affirming part of the sport for you, I'm sure.
There's only one event on the IMSA calendar that I would not recommend the average person book, travel to, and attend, and that's the Belle Isle weekend in Detroit. And I actually enjoy it, and have been there I don't know how many times, with IMSA being the Saturday portion of the event, with IndyCar being the headliner on Sunday. I would just not recommend that because you can't get around to a lot of places. It is truly a better track that if you're a big sports car fan and you are accustomed to long races and getting to soak it in, it's only, I think, 100 minutes long. I know that Long Beach is the same, but Long Beach is just awesome. But Belle Isle's the only one where I would actually dissuade people from going. Everywhere else, Daytona, Sebring, Long Beach, Mid-Ohio, Watkins Glen, Mosport /CTMP, Road America, and WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, and Road Atlanta. It's just ridiculous. And then strictly on the GT side, we have VIR added in as well, along with Lime Rock. It's the best. There's no question that IMSA has the best calendar. I should say there's no question. In my feeble brain, there is no question IMSA has the best calendar among all North American motor racing series. So, but yeah, great point there, Graham. Definitely shop around a bit and try different things. But yeah, Sebring, you're not going to go wrong there. That's for sure.
I'd add, by the way, from the European perspective, because there's bound to be listeners listening in that have a similar kind of thing about that. Look, WC has some great circuits. It's got some that are kind of, Fuji we'll be going to next, fabulous. Shanghai, great press room. Wouldn't be travelling to the other side of the world to go watch it. The European Le Mans Series, however, has a 6-race calendar of extreme quality. We'll be at Spa-Francorchamps this weekend for round 5, penultimate round of the European Le Mans Series. 41 cars to go and do battle there, with some important changes in some of those teams as well. Great circuits, and they're only an EasyJet flight away if you want to go and try something different from your local UK circuit or your local French or Dutch circuit. Give it a try, because I have to tell you, I always loved doing what I did with my son when we were spectating together. We go every couple of weeks to Brands Hatch and watch whatever was put in front of us there. And then we started to travel, and the scales fell from my eyes. It was a fabulous, wonderful part of discovering what makes this sport special. I heartily recommend it. And you don't need to do it every week. Just plan on doing one that takes your fancy. Get onto the internet, get people's advice as to the best way to get there, what you need to do when you're there, where to watch from there, what to avoid, the best hotels, the best restaurants and bars. You'll get great advice. Take the advice, go and have a great weekend, tell your friends, because that's the way we build the sport.
You know, I would be remiss, Graham, if I didn't mention throughout this entire episode, of which there are only 20 minutes left, by the way, I've been staring at a trending hashtag on Twitter. Hashtag MayoChup. MayoChup. And the little sponsored note here, it's promoted by Heinz Ketchup. Tap to bring MayoChup, hashtag MayoChup, to your city, which is a blended combination of mayonnaise and ketchup. I could just tell you that as someone whose love for both condiments on hamburgers and such, I could be the world's #1 fan of both, and certainly make a point of applying plenty, one on either side of the bun. The concept of MayoChup, I have had to fight off vomiting almost the entire episode, because they're, not only is that to me disgusting, the little video caption of it, of them showing a photo of a jar of Heinz real mayonnaise, deliciously creamy, plus Heinz tomato ketchup, my favorite condiment in the world, and an equal sign of Heinz MayoChup, this kind of beige, my dog vomited on my shoes type color of both things blended together. I just don't know. I don't know how to react to this. I know that it has nothing to do with sports car racing. The Weekend Sports Cars, presented by Cooper Tires, supported by our friends at PNC Bank. But I'm mystified knowing that we rely so heavily on social media and those who send in awesome questions. The fact that while doing so, and while parsing through questions on Twitter, that I've been staring at hashtag MayoChup, and that's where this world has ended up, my friend. I don't know if that's a statement, a comment, or a question, but I just felt like we couldn't end the episode without me telling you this.
I think I'd add one word, and one word only, and that word is piccalilli. Piccalilli is the thing.
I don't know what that is, but it sounds better than MayoChup.
You're gonna have to look it up now. It's awesome, but yes, modern world. There is, I'm sure, a sporting parallel somewhere for MayoChup.
I would rather eat Vegemite ice cream than try this product. And knowing those silly people from down under, they're like we have garlic ice cream here in the greater Bay Area because of Gilroy. I bet you someone down under has at least tried to sell or float Vegemite ice cream. That has to be a thing, right? Look, we ended the show. We've started the last two shows talking about poop somehow, and now maybe we're starting a new thing of talking about bizarre foods that distress us, or me, and by me I mean us.
I've had fun. I don't know about anybody else. We'll find out when we see how many listener figures we've got for this one. But thanks a million again to everybody on all the groups we're reaching out to on Facebook, on Twitter, on Reddit, elsewhere too. Thanks, a really high standard of questions. Again, we're getting through about half of them in what is actually a pretty long podcast now. So keep sending them. Don't give up. We are getting to them.
There's only 20 minutes left, though. So
there's only 20 minutes left. Absolutely. But I've had a ball with this again, and can't wait to look forward to next week. When that will be, I'm just looking when exactly we will be with that. We're not going to be a million miles away from, yes, me going on holiday. So for me, this weekend, as I say, it will be Spa-Francorchamps. And then leading into the next big part of the sports car racing calendar, which is going to be, well, the biggest clash we've got this year, MP, Petit Le Mans at Road Atlanta, at the same time as the Fuji WEC Fernando Alonso Spectacular. And that's going to lead to all sorts of storylines coming into it, some of which I know already and won't tell you because I'm that kind of guy, some of which are yet to emerge, but there are some shockers to come, as well as some good news to come from the fine people that bring you World Sports Car Racing. Wait and see what we can talk about next week on the Week in Sports Cars, and over to you to say goodnight.
And before I do that, I am nowhere this weekend other than home, which is a wonderful break after 4 consecutive weekends on the trot. Do have a weekend off, and then the following weekend I will be in Monterey to cover the just incomparable Ren Sport reunion, our friends at Porker. So, for however many of you silly folks who are still listening at the end of 2 hours and 40-ish minutes of this podcast, if you're thinking about questions and or requests or statements for next week's show, you might visit the Laguna Seca website and look for an entry list for the Ren Sport event, and pick out some cars that you would like to see me go and either try and do a visor cam with, regular in-car camera with, or capture in-car audio from, because the cool thing about Ren Sport is, for the most part, I just walk up to whomever owns the thing and says, hey, could I do ... So it's a little bit of an open canvas. I obviously have some cars that I certainly want to capture, either with video or audio or both. But if you are keen on Porsche, and if you're an endurance racing fan, I think that's actually one of the prerequisites. Might go and take a look at that entry list, and when we get ready and send out the call for questions next week on Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit, send me in some ideas. Give me some car numbers and classes or names, whatever it is, models that you think would be awesome to capture, and we will put those up not only on Racer.com for DailySportsCar.com to use as well, but for some of the in-car audio, you know that they'll be coming to our lovely little podcast here. And with that, it is getting to be your bedtime, Mr. Goodwin. It's getting to be lunchtime here, and I think it's time to say farewell. So, for the incredible Graham Goodwin, the less incredible Marshall Pruett, the Marshall Pruett Podcast, the Week in Sports Cars, our friends at Cooper Tires, and PNC Bank who make this possible, thank you for listening. Thank you for being the heart and core of our show by contributing and making it what it is. And we look forward to more next week.